listening to Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Don't run and hide. Don't be afraid. Don't turn away any longer. The truth will set you free. And now, your host, the captain of conspiracy, the prince of paranormal. This ain't your daddy's radio network show. This is Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Oh yeah, welcome back everybody. Welcome back. Fade to Black. Here we go, the Friday edition. Today is January 31st, 2014. 31 days into the new year. As always, we are live from the JP Motorsports Studios right here in Burbank, California. For KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network, I am your host, Jimmy Church. What is going on? Welcome. You know how I start off every show. Started off with a big salute to the proud men and women in uniform all around the world fighting the good fight for us. Without them, there is no me, there is no you, there is no us. And you can't hear me right now. Think about it. Happy birthday to Adrian Vandenberg, 60 years old. Now, for those of you out there that just went, huh? And then the other half of you that went right on, Jimmy. Good call. Adrian Vandenberg, in the very early days of MTV, everybody knew who Adrian Vandenberg was. He was a guitar player. Pretty good looking guy, too. 60 years old today. Where did the time go? Unbelievable. Our dead guy birthdays, we have two today. Terry Kath, again. Terry Kath, Guitars for Chicago, who tragically shot himself in the head while goofing around with an apparent stupid Russian roulette game. Thought he had an unloaded pistol. Shot himself in the head, dead in 1978, right after I had hung his poster on my wall when I was a little boy. Also, James Franciscus today. His birthday. Now, James Franciscus, again, I remember him from one thing, Planet of the Apes. He died at 57 years old. Very, very young. And but Beneath the Planet of the Apes, man, that was the movie. James Franciscus. He would have been, 73 or something. Okay. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. It's all easy to do. If you're over on artbell.com right now, just go to the Fade to Black page at Dark Matter. It's easy to do. Go to the Fade to Black page. All the links are right there at the top of the page. So you can follow, you can like, you can subscribe, do whatever you'd like. Tonight we're going to have open lines after Miss Kean. And I anticipate that to be around 9 or 9:15. She is in New York. She's staying up late for us tonight. The call-in number is 323-825-5045. 323-825-5045. Again, if you're at artbell.com, it's right there. Call-in number is right there. If you're at jimmychurchradio.com, everything you need is there too. Also, if you want to call in on Skype, that number is Fade2Black14. You can email me throughout the show, Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. And I've got a bunch of email that I want to read back after Leslie tonight. And some of the stuff came in yesterday about hoax and the word hoax. Who is a hoax, what is a hoax, and who is not, and what is not. And I've got about 10 of those I want to read. All interesting, all really good. The bumper music tonight, as always, is Doug Aldrich. Thank you, Doug. The virtual viewer, if you're not there right now, go over to jimmychurchradio.com and check out the Giza viewer. It is a reason to own a computer. It is a reason to have the internet. That is a 3D viewer of the one that we have posted of the Giza pyramids. You can choose your camera, choose your helicopter, and fly around Giza from any view. You can fly straight up to the side of a pyramid in high def. It is crazy. Go cruise around the Sphinx. And you've never seen detail like that. Unless you've been to Giza, this is as good as it's ever going to get. And you're in control. It is. I do it every day. I just go and check it out. Just check out the guy that's riding the camel. Just cruise right up to him. It's really cool. Stan's blog. Also, go check that out. Go Beckley Tepe. We've got the pictures posted. But the entire JimmyChurchRadio.com website is meant to be interactive. And I want it that way. It's what I would want. If I was you, that's what I would want to do, is go and do stuff like this. The forums page, I go out there, hang out every night after the show. I'm going to do it again tonight. And we've got a bunch of really cool stuff. Some new EVPs came in, a couple of John Teeter comments. And, I don't want to reveal a whole lot right now. But, and a particular listener who is probably listening right now is going to have to remain anonymous, but has sent me some really, really interesting John Teeter stuff that I'm going to work on over the weekend with a particular reporter. Now, once I get into this a little bit deeper, and I think I will have some information next week on this, I think we've got some breaking news. And this, before we get too deep into it, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's enough for me to mention something now. And so next week, I've got to work on this for a few days. But I think next week we're going to have some like some worldwide, earth-shaking, crazy John Teeter news. It's that good. Okay, now really quick, on February 18th, we are going to do Fade to Black on the road. We're going to take the show on the road, and this is what we're going to do. And if you live in Los Angeles, or around here, Palm Springs, whatever, and you want to see the show live, this is your chance. We have room for between 100 and 200 people, and if we have to, we'll change venues. But the information is right there on the website. You can go and click at JimmyChurchRadio.com. Go check it out. And we're going to do it in Studio City. But this is the deal. Richard Dolan, the man himself, has got a new book coming out. And I believe it is officially out now, as of today. I think it's out, or maybe yesterday. And he is going to do his only West Coast appearance on this show. He's flying in from the East Coast, and we are going to do the show live. 3 hours in front of a studio audience. And instead of just doing a normal book release, we are going to do the show live, and I'm going to be able to sit down with Richard, talk about his new book, talk about the future, talk about ufology, talk about disclosure, one-on-one in front of a live studio audience. Now, that is going to be Tuesday, February 18th in Studio City, California. Okay? Now, like I said, you can go over to JimmyChurchRadio.com. There's a little ad right there on the right side of the page. You can click on that and get all the information you need, where it's going to be at and stuff, and let us know if you're going to be attending. We would love, it's going to be packed. It's going to be sold out. We don't have that much room, but get in early and let's get this going. I would love to meet all of you. If we've got to change venues, we'll move next door and get a bigger room. It's not that big of a deal. But the way that the count is going right now, it looks like it's going to be sold out by the end of next week. And then we're going to have to change venues. But think about that for a second. We've never really done anything like this going on the road. And I'm totally excited. I want to meet everybody. So please go check that out. If you've ever wanted to see how this catastrophe hits the airwaves every night, you'll be able to come out, meet everybody from Jimmy Church Radio, and meet Richard Dolan. And he is going to question and answer session live on the air. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be a once-in-a-lifetime event, and February 18th. Okay. A couple of other things, and then I'm going to take a break, and we'll come right back with Leslie Kean. She's going to be with us for 2 hours live. And there was one other thing I wanted to talk about tonight. And, over at artbell.com, I got some email. I want everybody to go over and check out The Real Ghost Caught on Camera. I've mentioned that the last couple of nights. But it's a really interesting video. It's over at artbell.com, and I'm going to start a forum thread at our website about it. I'm not going to say anything else and watch the entire video. Watch it to the end. And you tell me what you think. That is a really interesting video. All right. So, you know what? I think we're just about ready. I'm going to go ahead and break now. When we come back, we will have Leslie Kean live from New York. All right. This is KJCR. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Don't touch that mouse. We'll be right back with Leslie Kean.
You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I got to tell you, it was a relief. National Tax Experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. It doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil three-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444, or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
All right. Welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Thank you, Keith Rowland. You're the best, man. Shoot me an email to jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. They're already flooding in. Get them in here. We might have some time after the show, after Miss Kean tonight. Jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. Go like, subscribe, do whatever you'd like. @JChurchRadio is Twitter. Fade to Black, Jimmy Church Radio. And it all has Jimmy or church or something. It's all about me, isn't it? And it's not. It's just the way it is. All right. Leslie Kean is an investigative journalist and author of UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record, a New York Times bestseller. She has been interviewed about UFOs by CNN, MSNBC, Fox, The Colbert Report, Michio Kaku's Science Fantastic. How about NPR, USA Today, the Columbia Journalism Review, and just about every other type of media out there. In 2011, she co-produced a feature documentary for the History Channel based on her book, Go on the Record. She was a producer and on-air host for a daily investigative news program here in L.A., KPFA. In 2002, she co-founded the Coalition for Freedom of Information, otherwise known as CFI. And Kean was also the plaintiff in a successful 5-year Freedom of Information Act federal lawsuit against NASA. Ms. Kean was a producer for the 2009 independent documentary, I Know What I Saw, and is currently working with Breakthrough Films on a new feature documentary. This March, technically next month, this month, she's headed off to France for a new book tour celebrating the publishing of Go on the Record in French. I welcome to the program Leslie Kean. Leslie, are you with us?
I am. Great to be with you, Jimmy.
You sound fantastic. You sound like you're sitting in front of me.
I'm sitting right next to you, actually.
Welcome to the show. And I had said to you earlier, and I really mean this. You've handled your career like I wish. If I was in your shoes, if I was doing what you're doing, I would have done it the same way. It's an impressive way. It must be tiring, but it's an impressive way to go about it.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the only way to go about it. And I guess it's tiring, but I think any hard work is tiring. So to me, it's the natural way to go about it since my training is as a journalist. So it works very well for me to do it the way I do it.
Let's okay. I start off every show with every guest the same way, so I'm just going to get this out of the way now. It's kind of a formality on this show, but that is we're just going to have a conversation. We're just sitting in my living room chatting, and wherever this goes, I go unscripted. I don't have any agenda. I don't have any questions lined up. I just know a lot about you, and that's scary. Okay, so
it's very scary.
Like I told you earlier today, it's going to be all about you. So, yeah, right. Where'd you get your education?
You mean college education?
Yeah. Where did
you mean journalism or what?
Well, because you've done so much. That's why I'm asking such a broad question, because I don't know whether to call you a broadcaster, a journalist, a broadcast journalist, a filmmaker, an author. I don't know. You've got your fingers in. So where did you go to school? Let's just start.
Well, I went to college. I went to a college called Bard College, which is in upstate New York. It's a small liberal arts college, and I've done a lot of different things, but what really led me to UFOs was my work as a journalist, which is I would call myself an investigative reporter, investigative journalist. Mm-hmm. And before I got involved with the UFO issue, I was doing a lot of work on the issue of Burma, the people of Burma's struggle for freedom. And I co-authored a book on that and did a whole lot of media articles on that after going to Burma and doing some investigations there. And then I started working at the radio station you mentioned, KPFA, which is actually in the Bay Area, not in L.A., but it has a sister station in L.A.
Right. Well, I had read that. I don't want to cut you out, but I had read that it was Pacifica, and I know exactly.
Yeah, it's Pacifica.
I've been to that station it's near Sony Studios. So
there is one in L.A. I forget what the name of it is, but the KPFA is sort of I think the best known of the Pacifica stations, and there's WBAI in New York. But
right.
It's a very progressive, grassroots radio station. And when I started working there, I was reporting on. So I got I'd done a lot of print journalism, and then I got involved with KPFA, and the journalist who had sort of mentored me doing the print work was also had a very popular investigative news program on KPFA, and so I eventually became a producer on that show and an on-air host on that show. And in doing that, I broadened my coverage a lot because I'd been very focused just on Burma, on this one issue for many years. And so, of course, when I became a host on this news program, I started to cover a whole range of different issues, which was really interesting. And I learned what broadcast journalism was. So you're right. I've done a lot of kind of different aspects of this because I've done print journalism and broadcast journalism. And it was while I was at KPFA doing this show that I got involved with the UFO issue. And that's sort of been my focus ever since about 1999. So,
what was the one event at KPFA? You've mentioned that 3 times now. I was going to ask anyway. What happened?
Well, I mean, how did the UFO thing
Yeah.
happen? Yeah, I mean, it really had nothing to do with KPFA. I just happened to be there at the time. But what happened was a colleague from France sent me an English translation of a report called the Cometa Report, which probably a lot of your listeners have heard of. But it was this 90-page study that was conducted by French, mainly high-level French military people, retired people, among them 4 or 5 generals, an admiral, the former head of the National Space Studies Center in France, which is the equivalent of NASA here. A very impressive group of people, engineers and scientists, and they formed this group, 13 of them, spent 3 years looking at some of the best UFO cases there are. Official cases mainly, and pilot cases. And they wrote this report about it. And I was given this sort of advanced copy because the Fund for UFO Research had gotten a grant from Lawrence Rockefeller to translate this thing into English, and they were going to distribute it to all this media. So I was sort of given this copy in advance of the distribution, so I was given this kind of scoop on it. And I thought, wow, this is a really big deal.
Right.
And
it was
incredible.
Yes,
what
it was.
These guys were saying,
Right.
And that led to my first. So I was so blown away by that. I started to really look into this topic more, and I ended up writing. I think I got the report in the fall, and by that spring, I had written a very lengthy piece that was published in the Boston Globe in May of 2000 about that report and issues related to that report. And that's what sort of got me going on the whole thing. And it was, the initial Boston Globe story was so successful, it kind of gave me a leg to stand on because I was very nervous about the ridicule before that.
Right.
And I was very private about it when I was looking into it.
Right.
I didn't even want to tell my colleagues at KPFA. I knew they all had attitudes about UFOs, you know, and I figured once I got the story done, then I would talk about it because then I had something to back it up.
Right.
So that's the way it all happened. I was very lucky to get that story in the paper. It was not easy, easy to do that.
Did you have an interest before the Cometa report came out? Did you ever see anything or any relative? Did you have any general interest before the Cometa report?
I did. I mean, off and on, I did. I was curious about the subject, and off and on over the years, I had read various books on it, and then I'd put it down for a few years, and then I'd read another book, and I always sort of had an interest in it, but I never dreamed I would ever become professionally involved. It was not like something I was that interested in.
Right.
Just sort of a curiosity. I think I'd read, when Communion came out, for instance, I read it, and I read it all in like 24 hours. I couldn't put it down, and a couple other books like that. And I'd talked to people over the years that had, involvement in various ways, but it was more of just sort of a personal curiosity than anything else. It was not a serious interest. And I didn't know that much about it until I started to look into it when I got the Cometa report. So that was a real turning point for me, an absolute, turning point in my life, that report. It just changed everything for me.
It's also kind of, and I would regret not asking this question, so I'm just going to ask it in more of a direct way. It's kind of a man's world. And you are one of the most successful researchers and journalists in this world. And is that good or bad? Does it work against you? And you seem to be, and you seem to be a point person too as well. And how do you explain that?
And what do you mean by a point person?
They go to you first, and I think, and I'm talking about CNN and MSN, and the media. being a female in such a male dominated subject. Is that good?
I don't know. It's a good question because I guess, quite honestly, I haven't really thought about it. I assume maybe it is an advantage because it makes you a little bit different, and maybe they like having a woman, come on their show instead of a man. I don't know. It's a good question. I've been aware that that most of the people involved with this are men, but I don't know. I've never thought about whether it's a pro or a con for me.
Right.
I just sort of do the work and don't think about it.
Well, I
can't answer that.
It's an obvious. Look at it like this for a second, Leslie. When you look at pictures of yourself, you're sitting at a table or in a room with 20 generals. And it's
that one picture is funny. I don't know if you put it up on your website, but I find it quite amusing.
Actually, I believe it is up on the website now. And so everybody, you can go over to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
I know, it's really funny, all these guys in their uniforms, and then there's little old me sitting there with my, 5'2" with my curly hair sitting there. I think it's funny.
And they're looking at you, and they're asking you very intense questions, and also in the reverse too, because you're interviewing them. And I'm just, are you ever intimidated? You're, like I said, you're the only, but you've never noticed. Wow, that's interesting. You've never.
Well, I certainly noticed, you notice that you're with members of the opposite sex. It's different but I'm just so used to it, I guess.
Right.
And I don't feel intimidated by it. No. Usually I'm in a situation where, where the subject is the topic that I'm dealing with, that I know something about. So, and especially since my book came out, that really, really changed things. Those pictures from Chile of me with all the generals, those were all taken after my book came out.
Right.
So that sort of elevated everything for me in terms of, the role that I play and my relationships to these agencies in other countries who are investigating the subject. I've become very interested in those agencies. And that's what I was, and mainly the Chilean one, but also the French one, so that I can learn about them and then teach the Americans to show them how something actually can work in another country, the kind of thing that we need here. So that's a whole adventure, exploration I've been on, but all of that's been after the book came out.
Right.
And I think having that book behind me, it's sort of like the way the Boston Globe was for me in the very beginning. I've really got a leg to stand on now.
Right.
And it's made a huge difference.
What year was the Boston Globe article?
That was in 2000.
And between 2000 now, 14 years have gone by. And I don't want to lose our thought about foreign countries' attitudes. I want to come back to that in a second. But how has the UFO investigation world, has it changed for you in the last 14 years? Is it the same?
Well, I think the media is definitely more open to it than it was. I think that's changed. I remember when I was first trying to get my story, back at the time when I did this, it was easier to get freelance articles published. That's a whole door that's completely closed now. So it's different in that way. But just in terms of the subject matter, I just get a sense that there's more coverage of it now, that there's more openness about it, that I would never have the kind of fear of ridicule now that I had then, because I think the climate has changed somewhat. I don't think it's very deep, the coverage, but I think there's just more of it and more interest and more openness about it. So I feel more comfortable with the issue than I did then. And I don't know how other people feel about it, but that's my perception, that it's just become a little more accepted in the media.
Well, how do you? Yeah, that's a great point. And how do you explain that, the openness?
I don't know, and I wouldn't exactly call it openness, but I just think, I don't know, maybe there's been more material, more information coming out. Various things have happened that have, I think Governor Fife Symington's coming forward, might have really, things like that have happened that sort of point to the seriousness of this, may have just opened up the media a little bit more. I don't know. I just think there's maybe more information that's come out in the last 10 years that's been, and they just seem to be more interested in reporting sightings. And I mean, I may be wrong. Other people may not agree with me. It's just sort of my perception. But then I don't know if that might be because I'm more confident in myself in the issue, so I don't feel as fearful, or I don't feel as concerned about ridicule, and I feel bolder about it. But
Right.
and I was really, the coverage that my book got. I mean, it's an unusual book, but I was very impressed with the seriousness and the openness and the interest that the media had in it when it came out. And I just don't know if 10 years ago if it would have been like that.
Were you ever able to talk when you were on the radio? Did you do any reporting, or did you leave radio before you had a chance?
Oh, you mean when I was still working at KPFA?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting because once the they would have never allowed me to do it, but once the Boston Globe story came out, I was actually allowed to do one segment on my show that the show called Flashpoints that I was working for. There was 3 segments on it every day. They were about 20 minutes each. And so I was allowed to produce one on UFOs. I remember it was such a big deal and such a thrill for me.
Right.
And I got Michio Kaku on, and I got, I think I interviewed Nick Pope, Michio Kaku, and one other person. I don't remember who it was. And to me, it just felt like this very nerve-wracking, almost traumatic thing that I was breaking some kind of barrier. And, it was like, oh my God, what are people going to think?
Yep.
And now it seems like nothing to me. It's just normal.
Well, I kind of did the same thing, and that's why I had to ask the question, because my career was in sportscasting, and this I've always wanted to do this, but I thought, and it was something that it was like in the closet. I was coming out of the closet with this, and I needed the release. When I started to tell friends and family what the new program was going to be, and that we're changing our gears, we're going to change the format of the station here, and we're going to do ufology. And are we alone in the universe? And then as I mentioned it, it was kind of like I had to brace for the slap, just like, oh, here it comes. And then I would always then follow that up with, but we're going to do, Egypt and lost civilizations, and we're going to do ghosts. It's not just going to be, because I just didn't know how people were going to react. But now I'm so cool with it. I'm out of the closet.
Exactly. It's just I think it's different. The whole climate's different.
It I think, and that's another great question though. How do you explain I want your opinion on this, and I tend to ask every guest the same thing, and I get a different answer every time, which is, it seems on satellite and on Dish, with all of these channels now, it seems like we've got 6 or 8 dedicated 24-hour-a-day UFO channels, where you can get.
I just wouldn't know. Just so that I never watch any of those things on the TV. So. Well,
how would you? Well, about the success of all of this, and how it's out there now. How do you explain the public's changing attitude, like it has been, and the openness that you were talking about earlier with the media? It is certainly there with the public in general. When did this shifting of the tide happen?
You mean, when did this change happen? Are you asking?
Are you there?
Are you there?
Yeah, I lost you for a second.
Yeah, so you were asking about this change, and with all the TV shows and the people's interest.
Yes, because
you were saying.
Yeah, the public is they're the ones that are driving the ratings on television, and the networks respond to that in kind with more programming. And it's just in the last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, it is just all over the place all the time now.
Yeah, well, I think it's great. Although I'm sure I don't like the programming that's on there, but I guess it's better than nothing. I don't know. I guess it's just sort of mutual back and forth. The more that people learn about it, the more that they're interested in it, and then the more that the media covers it, and then they learn more about it, and it just keeps building upon itself, I guess.
Right. And how were you okay, now this is, I want to talk a little bit when that I think was it History Channel? Yeah, it was History Channel that came to you to do the I Know What I Saw.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, that was I Know What I Saw was a film produced by James Fox, produced and directed by an independent film.
That's
James
right.
Fox did.
No, Go on the Record. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was called Secret Access UFOs on the Record. It was part of a History Channel sort of special series that they did. And this was a 2-hour documentary basically based on my book that I worked with an independent film company to produce. But we did it for the History Channel.
And how did they approach you about that?
Actually, what happened was the film company called Breakthrough Films, who I've worked with for years, they pitched it to the History Channel. And the History Channel immediately went for it. I mean, lots of times they don't move quickly, and they wanted it right away. They just pitched the whole concept. So that's how it happened. But the History Channel, being the executive producer, of course, had certain requirements and certain ways they wanted us to do it stylistically, and certain things like we couldn't do too many foreign cases, and there were certain limitations that were placed on it by the History Channel because they were the ones basically producing the thing. So we had to sort of go by their guidelines, but within those guidelines it was produced very well by this company called Breakthrough Films, I think.
And pretty close to the book.
Yeah, basically, I mean, it was just cases from the book, and then it was based on the same theme as the book, in terms of how it approached the subject and what kinds of statements it made about what do we know and not know. No claims of extraterrestrials, and, the fact that most cases can be explained, but there's maybe 5% that can't be, and we want to look at those cases,
right? The
most interesting of those cases. And then we just sort of went through, we did the Belgian wave, the O'Hare case, what else? The Rendlesham Forest case, and we had, Chuck Holt on and various people from those different cases. So some of it was things people have seen before, but I think they did it very well. I think it was, people got rave reviews from the UFO community, and my website is being updated now, and I'm going to be putting a link on the website to it's on YouTube, the whole thing, so people can watch it there. I'm going to put that link on my website, but you can find it on YouTube.
Okay, we'll put a link up on our website. Now the producers are listening to me as we speak, so we try to do a lot of that stuff in real time. So we might beat you to the punch there.
Okay,
but
you can find it very quickly on YouTube. You just write in UFOs Secret Access. It's called Secret Access : UFOs on the Record.
You'll watched
find it right away on YouTube.
I watch it all the time. It's like it's like a brush up on the homework, and I've seen it way too much. How did your relationship? Explain to me how you met John Podesta and that relationship.
Well, that started back right after I did the Boston Globe story, and then I did another story for the Providence Journal about aviation safety cases, and around that time. I was approached by Larry Landsman from the Sci-Fi Channel because they wanted to launch a campaign, a Freedom of Information Act campaign, with focused on a specific UFO case, and they were putting together a team of people to do that, and they wanted me to sort of spearhead it as the journalist, as sort of the public face of the campaign. And to suggest a case for them to use. And so I consulted with people and everything. That's how we came up with the Kecksburg case, which we can talk about. But just to answer your question about John Podesta, the Sci-Fi Channel hired his brother's public relations firm, which at the time was called Podesta Mattoon in Washington. It's one of the leading PR firms in Washington. Very, very good and prestigious operation. And Tony Podesta, John's brother, knew that John was interested in the subject matter and had sort of been known at the White House as, an X-Files fan and that kind of thing. So we invited John through his brother to come to our first press conference where we launched our initiative, and he was willing to do it. And he was willing to step up and support the effort we were making, which was to obtain government documents on this case. And John is is a real supporter of open government and believes very strongly in the Freedom of Information Act and in the people's right to all the government information that they're entitled to by the law. And this was just another case of that, combined with his interest in the subject matter, which is certainly skeptical but curious.
Well,
so he's ever since then, he's just been a real supporter of the work that I do. I mean, I'm so grateful to him. He's just stepped up when I've needed him for certain things, and he followed the whole progress of this lawsuit that we launched against NASA, which took many, many years. He came to a second press conference that we held, and then he sort of kept abreast of it. And I went down a couple of times and let him know what was going on and talked to him, met with him, and informed him about it. And he was very interested in the whole thing and very supportive.
He's the former White House chief of staff. Now that is about as heady of a title as there is on planet Earth. let's not beat around the bush here. Was he? Do you feel that your communication with him, were you always cognizant? Were you always aware of who you were dealing with, and was he very open all the time about the subject matter? Because I would think he would never talk about it, and I don't, please tell me, how did you communicate with him, and how open was he? And then I'm going to ask the obvious question.
He's very upfront about it because he doesn't have any special secrets or any special knowledge about it. He just is curious and interested. And always has been, and he's courageous enough to be willing to just be upfront about that, and to realize that this issue should have the same recognition as any other issue should have.
Right.
He's just very rational about it, and he doesn't feel he's not. A lot of people who do feel that way, they still won't talk about it because they're afraid of ridicule. He just isn't. He's just a very smart and courageous guy who is just not going to play games about it.
Right. Well,
and he's willing to come forward and say, "Hey, there's this journalist here who's going about this in the right way, and we I support the effort that the government should release all the information that it has about this subject matter, and I support this FOIA initiative." That's basically the approach he took. And then when I asked him to write the foreword to my book, he just sort of broadened that and said, he supports this approach, and he commented on my efforts to try to get a government agency set up here, which is sort of where my focus is now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he can really be helpful now. But so he's just sort of been somebody who's willing to support what I'm doing, but he's not out there on his own, thinking about UFOs or doing anything himself.
Right.
He's just willing to be supportive when I ask him to be, if I don't ask him for too much,
Right.
It's not like it's a major concern of his or anything like that.
It's
not.
You said that he doesn't have any specific information. So I guess what you're saying is, did you actually go, "Hey, John, check this out. Do we have aliens at Area 51?
Well, I mean, I asked him when he was at the West, if he had anything, any kind of information. Absolutely not. He wasn't involved with it at all. Now, somebody else could say, well, if he did, wouldn't tell you. Well, maybe that's the case, but personally, I believe he's telling me the truth, that he was not, just wasn't privy to anything in particular. I mean, he was aware that Clinton went and tried to get information, and he was aware of what was going on, but he was a busy guy with his job, and he wasn't fooling around with UFOs when he was at the White House, as far as I'm concerned. And I accept that that's the case, but I just, I believe them. I believe that that's the case, and that's what he told me.
Right. You're not going to believe, right as you answered that question, Skype garbled.
Oh, you're kidding me. I couldn't tell on my end.
I know I'm probably coming across clear to you too at the same time, but I'm just saying that's conspiracy right there.
And we've got the Men in Black here, right?
Everybody listening to this show is just like, come on, really? And then all of a sudden you come back nice and clear. And right
weird.
at the
well, the bottom line, what I said was that John Podesta was not privy to any kind of deep, dark secrets or secret government programs or anything like that when he was working under Clinton. And he wasn't particularly involved with UFOs either. He was always interested and curious, but He doesn't have any secrets or anything like that.
No, we started to. I've got to jump back in the conversation a little bit. I don't want to let the thought go, which is you've done a lot of stuff overseas, and you just came back from a trip in South America, actually, right? Isn't that where you said you were going? Yeah. Okay. And do you find an attitude that is a little bit different with both defense and government in general in foreign countries, and how the approach and the subject is dealt with compared to the United States?
Absolutely different. Yeah, very, very different. And that's something that really interests me. And the two countries I'm most focused on are France and Chile, because in my opinion, they have the best official agencies in the world. I think that really Chile is number one. They're just really, really phenomenal. And the thing about it is that the agency, which is set up within the equivalent of our FAA. So it would be as if the FAA here had an office with 4 full-time staff members doing nothing but working on UFO investigations. I mean, that's what they have in Chile. And it's extremely well integrated because, everybody knows it's there. Everybody accepts it. The agency meets with a committee of scientists. It meets with military people, and it's got access to every kind of information that it would ever need in doing an investigation. So if something happens, it can call on psychologists, it can call on the equivalent of their FBI, the local police force, the weather people, the radar experts at the airports. I mean, everybody is willing to contribute, and it's just very well integrated and accepted. So all the pilots flying around Chile know that if they see something, they send it over to this agency, and there's no questions about whether they're going to do that or not. So it's extremely different from what we have here, where our pilots don't even have a reporting form for this, and they're actually told by the FAA not to report UFOs, but to take them somewhere else. So I've just been really fascinated to be. Actually, I've spent a lot of time in the office with the people in Chile, and I've learned how the agency works by just being around and observing it and doing a lot of interviews with people there. And it's just exemplary to me as to how something should be set up in all over the world, because it actually is working very well. So it's sort of like an example for the rest of the world is how I look at it. And I want to bring that information back to people in America to kind of use as a model to let people here know that this can work. Well, we don't even have to have 4 staff people here. How about 1?
Yeah, just one.
One will do.
Well, and how about
even, just somebody who's only doing it, half of their job is this and half is something else. I mean, I'm not going to expect 4 full-time staff people set up at the FAA. That's not going to happen.
And how about just a general change in attitude?
What's that?
How about just a general change in attitude too, as well? I mean, a pilot in Chile is not worried about losing his job or getting grounded if he opens his mouth and says what he, possibly had seen. He's not worried, so he's going to speak, and that's just a different attitude. Here,
exactly.
Here you open up your mouth, you're out of a job. And
it's right. It's bad, but I think the way to change the attitude is to have that staff person set up in an official capacity to sort of serve the role in a lower way, because it's not going to be 4 people. But I think you're not going to have the attitude change until you have this shift within the official world. And the only way that's going to happen is to have something official set up in Washington that deals with this subject matter. And that changes everything. And that would facilitate the change in attitude that you're talking about. Even just the smallest change in terms of the official structure, like having somebody from the Office of Science and Technology policy, for instance, be assigned a 6-month stint with the subject to even look into whether it's worthy of study, something like that. That's how it could start. And then maybe it would grow from there. But even something like that would make a big difference, I think, in changing attitudes.
Over on jimmychurchradio.com, I want everybody to go over to the homepage. There are some pictures there that we posted that we're going to talk about. One, Some of the photographs there are of Miss Kean with the Chilean Air Force and some where she's having these official. Go look at those pictures because I want her to explain those in a second. But I also asked you earlier to send me the one picture that just made you scratch your head and go, and that was my exact email. And you you sent us that picture, and that is on the website now too. So I want everybody to go over to jimmychurchradio.com and look at this picture. And I think there's two. There's a close up, and then there's the regular picture. And I am going over there now. Explain what we're looking at.
Okay, you want me to explain that one picture?
Yeah,
the Costa Rica one.
I'm sorry, of Costa Rica. Explain this picture.
I mean, it's a really, I think it's a phenomenal photograph because one of the amazing things about it is you're looking down. Yeah, it was taken from a geographical mapping plane. It was actually a government plane in the government of Costa Rica, airplane that had a camera strapped under the plane and was just mapping the terrain. So every 7 seconds, the camera just took a photo. And what you're seeing is below the object, you see this dark area, which is the ocean. And then there's some land. It's not an ocean. I'm sorry. It's a lake. And then I don't know if the image I sent you shows the land as well or not. But what's fascinating about it is you're looking down onto the top of the UFO. Now, most photographs of UFOs, you're looking up at them. But this, you're looking down at it, which I think is extraordinary in itself, but also it's extremely clear. It's sharp. You can see the sun reflecting off the top of the object. It's a disc-shaped object. You can see a little ridge along the side. There's a lot of detail there. And it was very, very thoroughly analyzed by Jacques Vallée and Richard Haynes in an article they published in the Journal of Scientific Exploration years ago. It was taken in 1976. It's also an official photograph, so we know that it's not hoaxed.
Right, it's not doctored.
It was taken by this mapping plane, and then the government officials saw what was on the film.
It looks like it was
a bona fide picture.
It looks like the altitude is really high. Do you know what the altitude is in this shot?
I'm not sure, but I'm sure it's in that study. I don't have that information at the top of my head, but if people can find the study by Richard Haynes, if you just search it, Richard Haynes and Jacques Vallée, they did this whole report on it. And I'm sure they said what the altitude of the mapping plane was. Now, they would know.
Again, I'm stressing with everybody out there, go over to the website, jimmychurchradio.com, scroll down on the bottom of the page there, below everything. We have a gallery set up, and I want you to look at this Costa Rican, picture that we're talking about, because this is, it's almost shocking, because I can't. I would like to have somebody try to explain this. Explain this. Now, if you're gonna debunk, if you want to be a skeptic, well, then that's fine. Explain this, because I don't even know what I'm looking at. I look at this, and you have one of the most classic descriptions of a flying saucer. That's the first thing. It's metallic. It's round. It's got the dome top. It's a government camera on a government plane.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the picture you have there on the right, actually, if you back up from that even more, you can sort of see in the corner of that, there's a little bit of a lighter area. It's actually, I probably should have sent the more distant one. If people who have my book, I have the reproduction in the book of the more distant shot, which shows actually the land. So the object is, as I said, over a lake, but to the left, there's land that you can see in the bigger image of it. I think if you posted the bigger image of it, though, the object would be really tiny. But it's so you're looking, anyway, just so people get the idea that you're looking down on a lake behind the object. And if you have my book, it's on the first page of the photographic insert in the book. So it's absolutely, I think it's my favorite UFO photo of ever is that one. And I just love the picture.
And how have the critics, describe this to you or try to explain it away?
It's a good question. I mean, I've never seen it explained away to my satisfaction. I don't know how many, if they've tried.
I don't
know what anybody could say about it because they can't say it was hoaxed.
I wonder what class would have said.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think there's been a paper written about it by, was it Leonard Stringfield? No, it's not Leonard Stringfield, but somebody has written a paper sort of denouncing it or something, but I haven't read it. But I just have no doubt about this image. I mean, I know that I've spoken to the Chileans who have spoken to the Costa Ricans about it, and it's all been sort of verified at high levels.
It's truly, and when I ask you to send me the head scratcher, and I've seen this photograph before. I've seen it before, and I've always raised an eyebrow when I saw it. And I know the picture that you're talking about, the one that is from a distance.
More distant. Yeah, people can find it on the internet if they're not. This is a good quality reproduction of it, but you can't. Yeah, you can see it from a distance. And I would recommend people do that to put it in perspective. The interesting thing about it too, Jimmy, is that it was one of the reasons it's so clear is because it was this huge, like 8x10 negative.
Right.
Very, very, very big negative because they were using it to map the Earth, which means they wanted to see all the details of the Earth below. So they use these huge negatives, which have incredibly high resolution.
Right.
I've actually seen the negative for this picture, and that's one reason why it's so clear and so beautiful.
Now, how would you have? Yeah, exactly. Like a Hasselblad large frame negative with
something like that, right?
Yeah,
8x10 though. That's
big. An 8x10, which is huge, which means the best optics, the best lens, and everything else, and then boom. How would you like to have been the guy, the photo analyst, flipping through the negatives? And I'm not trying to be cavalier or be funny about this, but how would you like to have been that guy that said, what is what? What is what? Had to go grab a supervisor.
Exactly. It was only in one frame too. I mean, it was it wasn't in the frame before, the frame after. I think it's 7 seconds between frames. So I think they were able to calculate estimates of how fast it was going, and that I think Haynes and Vallée, based on knowing, there's a lot of information that they knew here. Because it was of the situation that it was taken under, so they were able to determine a lot of things about it from that. Like for instance, the speed. I think they have some sense of that because of the 7 second delay between the frames.
Right, and
so anyway,
the other fascinating thing for me, and it's truly astounding. And if you're not over on the website, go and check it out, jimmychurchradio.com, so you understand what we're talking about. The close up, once you look at the far away shot, and then medium, and then when you look at the close up, because like you're saying, the lens and the camera, the film, the negative, and then you look at this close up that you have sent us that we have posted up there, and it is shocking. It really is. I mean, I don't know how to explain what I'm looking at. I just don't.
Gives you chills, doesn't it?
It really does. It really does. And okay, now I want to talk about a couple of things really quick that were in the book. I do want to touch upon Kecksburg. I know that something happened at Kecksburg. That's an obvious thing. And something fell out of the sky. Was it Russian? Was it not? I'm starting to feel today, and as much reading as I have done on Kecksburg, I'm starting to feel that it wasn't Russian, and that's my take. I know that you went through this lengthy lawsuit with NASA, and for them to actually go up in front of the judge. Well, I'll let you explain. You were there, but for them to, we've lost boxes of files. Oh, we found them. Oh, we took samples of the metal. Oh, we didn't. Oh, it was Russian. It wasn't Russian. To have all of these 180-degree moves go on over the years with that case, and how, because it was obviously researched and covered by different arms branches of our government, whether it was local police and the Army and the Air Force and NASA. There's documentation out there, and nobody lost anything, is what I'm saying. And they know exactly what happened. But so let's talk about Kecksburg a little bit. When did it happen? What was the time of day? And just the basics, and then we'll go into your research on the case.
Okay, so what happened was in 1965, December 9th, 1965, it happened around 4:45, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Something came down over this little village of Kecksburg, which is about 40 miles from, I think it's southeast of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in a very rural area. And there was a fireball that was seen prior to when this object came down. There was a fireball seen across numerous states coming down from Canada through Ohio. I think it went through Michigan, then Ohio. And whether that fireball was actually the object that came down, we don't know. But the timing was more or less the same. And before the thing came down in Pennsylvania, people witnessed it kind of slowing down and making turns. It seemed like it was under control because it was making turns. It came down in this wooded area. There were sort of blue sparks that came up. And over the next few hours, lots and lots of people saw it. The military came out in droves, and they cordoned off the area where the object was and eventually put it onto a flatbed truck. It was mainly the Army. Put it on a flatbed truck, and around 1 o'clock in the morning drove out really fast and took it away. And various stages of this were seen by just so many witnesses. Some saw it actually on the ground in the woods. Some saw it being put onto the truck. Some saw it going away on the truck. Some saw it, before it landed and crashed. So there was extraordinary amount of eyewitness coverage and news coverage too. I mean, they were actually interrupting programs locally and reporting on this event. It was a very big deal in the news. So we know something happened, and yet the next day the Air Force announced that it was just a meteor and that nothing had come down, which was just sort of preposterous given what we knew happened the previous day. So that's basically, in a very simplified form, that's what happened. And it's very interesting because the Air Force conclusion was so dramatically contradictory to what we actually know. We know something came down.
Well, we know what we do know is meteors don't take turns.
Exactly. Meteors do not make turns, and they leave huge craters and, et cetera. Meteorites actually, they said it was a meteorite, which means it just burned up in the sky. They're saying that absolutely nothing came down.
Nothing came down, and they retrieved nothing. And those trucks that we had weren't really there, and there was nothing on the back. It was.
I know. It's really like night and day.
Yes.
That's one thing that interested me so much about the case was that there was this clear black and white contradiction between the official analysis of the case, when there's a file in Project Blue Book on it, and what people actually saw, and what's well recorded in the media too. It's not just people, but it was what the media reported during the evening and during the next day. And I've actually spoken to one of the lead reporters for the local paper there who was on the scene. There's just no question that something happened there.
So your initial knowledge of Kecksburg was for your research on the book. You didn't know about it, you know what I mean, hearing about it in the 70s or something. This was new to you. So I'm assuming, right, that's the case.
Yeah, it was. It had nothing to do with my book, though. It was way before the book. I started on this in around 2002 when the Sci-Fi Channel people approached me to take on this kind of a campaign that they wanted to launch. So, and really, the work on this case was all done by Stan Gordon, who lives in the area in Pennsylvania, and he started working on this case the year it happened, literally. So he had done so much incredibly good investigation and interviews and, endless files, and just had so much information on the case that we were able to just come in with our focus being this Freedom of Information Act effort that was being launched. But all the work had been done on the case itself. So thanks to Stan.
Right.
Thanks to Stan.
So when you get to town, you're doing your investigation and you're not getting I need to hear this from you. You're not getting the right information. You're getting contradictory information. And how did you start to deal with this and know that you had to take NASA to task?
What we did was we wrote. I had a law firm and this whole team of people I was working with. We sent FOIA request letters to lots of different agencies. But the interesting thing about NASA was that we already had some files that Stan had gotten previously from NASA, and we asked them for. We used about 5 or 6 different search terms, and we asked them for documents that we already had. And they said that they didn't have them.
Exactly.
They came back and said, we have nothing specific, nothing in response to your request. We have nothing responsive. Well, we knew that they did because we had them in our files already. So we went back to NASA and we said, hey, I'm sorry, you do have documents because here they are. Here are some copies of them. You already released these documents. And then so we actually won an appeal through them. It's this whole legal process. We were able to prove to them that they were not accurate, basically, in saying they didn't have them because we already had them.
Where did you go to?
That forced them. What's that?
Where did you go? Where did all of the court action happen? What state?
It was in Washington, and that didn't happen till later. We won this appeal, and then NASA claimed they were going to send us within 6 months. They were going to do this massive search for us, and they were going to send us all this stuff, and nothing happened. They didn't do anything, so that's why we filed the lawsuit. And the lawsuit was filed in Washington, D.C., and that's where all the work went on, because that's where our law firm was, that's where the lawsuit was, that's where the court hearings were. And I went to one of the hearings, and it was really fantastic. The judge was totally sympathetic to our side.
Now, I read a couple of things about that judge. So was it the same? Apparently, it was the same judge it was a multiple year period. Am I correct? It was the same judge?
Many years, yeah.
Yeah, and I had read, you have to tell me, were you there when he said, look, I'm just as frustrated as the plaintiff here.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about that in this piece I wrote for the MUFON Journal, I think it was, which I should have sent you to post. But yeah, I mean, it's probably on this Coalition for Freedom of Information website. But yeah, he said that, and it just so happened I went to. There were many hearings, and I happened to go to the last hearing, I think, in which he made comments like that, and I couldn't believe it. I was sitting right there in the courtroom, and he said that, and he said, heads should roll at NASA, and you guys aren't doing your job. What am I supposed to tell people? He said, what are we supposed to do? You're not doing what, and he was really scolding them. It was just incredible.
Well, it's got to make you feel good that the judge is on your side.
No, it was great. It was great.
And I just
because the amount of work that went into this. I mean, it was the least reward. We deserved it after the years and years and years. You wouldn't believe how tedious the work was in this lawsuit, to just have to sift through thousands, just hundreds and hundreds of pages of boring stuff. And then to have to write these long letters requesting things all by number, and everything was filed here and there. And it was just extremely tedious to do. So that was the little reward we got, was this one hearing with the judge where he was very passionate, and it was great. And he basically ruled, we ruled in our favor that it was a settlement, which means that nobody really won, but NASA was forced to do another extensive search and to pay for our legal costs, which certainly suggests that they didn't win the suit, even though we had to. It's a lot of legal stuff in terms of how you can describe it and everything.
Okay,
but the bottom line is we never got any documents about Kecksburg.
Well, I want to talk about Cosmos 96, and I'm a little bit confused on that. But first, check this out. We've got a list of email that just came in, and one of them you're going to laugh. And I just want to clear this up right now for everybody. One of our listeners just said, Jimmy, you keep saying Kane. Her name is Kean. So let's clear that up.
I really appreciate that person trying to look out for me.
No,
but it's so funny. I had to make sure before we went on the air that Jimmy knew that my name is actually pronounced Kane. And I sympathize with the listener because it's the emailer, because it's spelled Kean. So it's a Scottish name. and it's is pronounced Kane, but you would never know that from just reading it. So thank you, emailer, for looking out for me that way. I appreciate it. I think that's funny.
It was hilarious. So I just had to get that out. I have a bunch of other emails, but let's get back to Cosmos 96. There was the one thing that, well, it's actually two things. NASA said originally, well, first off, nothing came down. That was the first thing. And then they said it wasn't Russian. And then I'm trying to think of, was it Nicholas Johnson? Was that who? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right.
And I believe, again, I'm running without notes, so you just correct me if I'm wrong. That's fine. You can, it's okay. We're live radio.
Okay.
But I think you interviewed him originally. Now, when you interviewed him, what was his stance? Was it that it was Russian? It wasn't? It was a satellite in your original interview?
He was really, really significant because there was always some ambiguity about whether what came down in Kecksburg could have been this Russian satellite called Cosmos 96, which it actually came down in Canada at 3:18 a.m. the same day of the Kecksburg event. So this thing came down early in the morning, and Kecksburg was in the evening, basically.
Okay.
But a lot of people had always assumed, well, that's probably what it was, even though we did know it was at 3 a.m. But I wanted to find out, and we also learned and we knew that happened, that Cosmos 96 did come down in Canada. So I asked Nicholas Johnson, is it conceivable? Could you find out? Because he's the leading authority on orbital space debris. I mean, he's an absolute top of the line famous guy at NASA who heads up anything to do with this kind of, with orbital debris and space stuff coming in and out. I mean, he was just, it was a miracle that I even was able to talk to the guy. Mm-hmm. And so I said, what we want to know, is it conceivable? Is it even possible that what came down in Kecksburg could have been some component of Cosmos 96? And so he went and he found the data that he needed to find, which wasn't that easy for him to find, but he got it. The data that he needed, which indicated what the orbit was for Cosmos 96. And he was able to look at it and map out if any parts of Cosmos 96 had continued in orbit after that time when it came down. Because that's the theory. Maybe some parts kept going and then they landed in Kecksburg. But he learned that none of it was anywhere near Pennsylvania, could have possibly been anywhere near Pennsylvania at that time of day at 5 p.m. in the afternoon. So he said it was absolutely impossible for Cosmos 96 to have been what came down in Kecksburg. And it was very exciting because it just kind of closed the door on that possibility, which had been the leading skeptical argument against, this being anything anomalous. As the people used to say, that's what it was. It completely closed the door on that possibility. And in fact, Johnson made the really interesting statement that he didn't think anything, he said nothing man-made came down that day because
Oh, I've lost you, Leslie. If you can hear me,
our atmosphere and lands.
Okay, repeat that.
And he said it was nothing man-made that came down in Kecksburg.
That's
whatever that means, however you want to interpret that, but that's what he said.
And it's these 180-degree answers. They keep coming back with either either it's a meteor or it's not, either it's Russian or it's not, either it's man-made or it's not. Be straight with this. And why do you think that NASA kept coming back with different answers? And I don't understand. And now that was in 2003. With your interview with Johnson, with the FOIA documents that came out later, were those different from his answer in 2003?
Well, you see, he was completely separate from the lawsuit. I mean, it's like NASA is such a massive organization. It's not like the people in different departments communicate with each other.
Right.
So he was just sort of off in his own place in Texas doing his thing. The lawsuit was going on, at these offices and other places. He really had nothing to do with it. So he wasn't like representing, there was no cohesiveness, And to answer your question about the lawsuit, no, I mean, we never got any documents that were relevant to anything to do with Kecksburg. I mean, that's the bottom line. We were hoping even just one little lead or something like that. But I mean, we had some historically interesting documents, but nothing on Kecksburg. And it was even kind of striking because they did send me a bunch of other reports on meteors around the same time, and newspaper clippings and so on about other meteors. Now, there were many newspaper articles about the Kecksburg, what they called a meteor at the time, but none of those were sent with the NASA stuff. So it was just sort of conspicuously absent from all these places where it should have been.
Right.
Which made us think that it was probably filed the papers were probably classified or just not available through the FOIA.
And what about the metallic testing that they had allegedly done originally, that they said that they had done? All of that paperwork, nothing at all had come back out of the FOI request?
No, we didn't get anything. And, absolutely nothing out of hundreds and hundreds of pages. Nothing specific to Kecksburg.
That is
Absolutely
incredible.
Not.
Absolutely
It's very
incredible.
bizarre. I mean, the only thing I can think of is because obviously they have something on it because they had all these documents on other meteors. So even if they wanted to classify it as a meteor, there's no question they would have been involved, because when anything fell from the sky in those days, NASA's job was to go and deal with it.
Well, and
people reported NASA personnel at the scene. So the fact that there was nothing there, it just suggests that it's somewhere else, that they have it stashed somewhere where people can't read it. But they're supposed to tell you if something is classified. They're supposed to say, we cannot release this information. Of course, they don't do that.
Right.
It's just that, the people in the FOIA offices are just sort of clerks that are hired to look through files. They do their jobs. They don't find it, and they tell you, we don't have it. They know nothing about what might be stashed in some other location at a higher level.
Right. And this is the thing. All NASA has to do, or the Air Force, if they just want to close the door on this, is just say simply, it was a Russian satellite and it's classified and we can't talk about it. That's what it was. And then the case is closed. But to not say anything, or lost documents, or it wasn't there, or it was a meteor, or it was and then not say anything at all, then it allows everybody else to fill in the blanks. They're going to say what they want to say.
Yeah, it's true. But they really could not have said it was a Russian satellite, because we know we were totally able to eliminate that possibility.
Right.
So they could have said, this is information that's it's due to national security or whatever, it remains classified. But then they would have been challenged to release it. After 25 years, you're supposed to release these things. And you have to ask yourself, why, after all these years, this was in 1965.
Right.
Why would it be important to keep something from that long ago so secret? Right. It just doesn't make any sense.
And now it's turned into Die Glock. Because they haven't said anything, and now it's Debel, it's a time machine, it's German, and
right. Well, a lot of speculation. It's probably never going to be solved, unfortunately.
And all they need to do is just say one thing, and we could close the door on it. And whatever it is, just say something instead of saying we've lost the documents, we have nothing. Then we know, that they're not telling the truth, and now we're forced into closing our own chapter on Kecksburg. I want to talk about Hudson Valley a little bit. Were you raised anywhere around Hudson Valley?
No, I was actually raised in New York City, so that's sort of near the Hudson Valley, I guess. But during the Hudson Valley wave, I was not. Let's see, I moved out to California in '89, so I guess for part of that I was around this area, but I was a little bit aware of it at the time, actually, because I had a friend who lived in that Hudson Valley.
Well, that was my question. But, do you remember the hysteria? Because it got a little bit crazy there for a little while, with this story in the media.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking again earlier today about the head scratching photographs. And the one photograph that was taken, you probably know the officer by name. Was he Highway Patrol? Was he was a cop of some kind?
Right. I mean, as far as I know, he was just a police officer. I don't know that much about him.
Right.
But the photograph that he took is just astonishing, really beautiful.
So
and it was taken by this police officer. He was not alone when he took it. So, as far as I know, there were one or two other people with him.
Now the photograph,
it's just a great photo.
The photograph that we're talking about is also on the at jimmychurchradio.com. It's on the homepage. Scroll down, and the photograph is taken at night, and it's got a ring of multicolored lights that go around the perimeter of the saucer of the craft. So you can go over to jimmychurchradio.com and check this photograph out while Leslie and I talk about it now, because it is putting the Costa Rica shot aside, it is just as much of a head scratcher as that Costa Rican shot. And so tell us about this photograph and what is everybody looking at?
I don't know as much detail about it as I know about Costa Rica. I think I just know that this police officer was out and he saw the thing and he pulled out his camera and took the photo. And we know more or less where he was located at the time. But I don't know a lot of other detail. I know that it was analyzed by Bruce Maccabee, though. I think he has something on his website about the analysis that he did on this, which was interesting. And I think it's interesting that there are these little tiny sort of red. I don't know if people can see it on the website, but you can see it in the one in my book. There's these little tiny sort of red things that are outside of the actual circle, which might relate to the sort of red light ball phenomenon that I find really interesting, that occurred both in Hudson Valley and in Belgium, where these red light balls came out of objects and sort of appeared to be searching or doing something separate from the bigger object. But,
that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a spectacular photo. Again, it's not something that you could easily explain. I mean, it's not quite as clear as the Costa Rica one because it's at night and you're just seeing the lights. You're not seeing any shape of a physical object.
Well, when I look at this picture, and I'm looking at it now, when I look at this picture, I don't know how to, kind of like the Costa Rican picture, in that I can't explain what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the picture right now, and I've got it enlarged on my screen. And for everybody, it's on the homepage at jimmychurchradio.com. And it's almost a side view. It's not from the top like the Costa Rica picture because that's taken from that. But this is a side view, and you've got, looks like green lights and red lights. It's a perfect circle, and I can't explain again what I'm looking at. And I wonder how far away. Do you know how far away the officer was when he took this picture?
I don't. I mean, I wish I had more information about it. I just don't know that much about it. And I think the best place to look would be on Bruce Maccabee's website if people want to know more about it.
How long did
I just don't have a lot of detail on it.
How long did the Hudson Valley wave go on for?
Oh, it went probably 5 years or so.
Yeah.
I mean, it was long. It was for a long time. I'd say starting in around 82 and probably went on till certainly 86, 87.
Right. And
yeah, I mean, it was just amazing.
And then right after that, and for a researcher too, I wish I would have been more in the business back then. But for a researcher, because everything went from Hudson Valley, and you just touched upon it, into the Belgian wave.
Right. And I love looking at both of those. I mean, they're both fascinating in themselves, but what I do in my book is I draw the comparison between how the U.S. government approached the wave here versus how the Belgian government approached the wave there. And they were sort of similar waves and similar in time, too. I mean, the Belgian wave was really right after. It was started in 89.
Right.
So they were quite close, but there's such a striking difference in terms of how they were handled. And it's sort of like what we were talking about earlier about the U.S. government and the FAA and everything. This is another example of how sort of negligent our government is in terms of how it deals with this subject. And I think comparing those two waves is a really clear way to see the difference in terms of what the response was.
Well, I was talking to Philip Mantle about this last night, and it's just kind of, strange that last night he was on, tonight you're on, and we're talking about the same subject. But I wanted his attitude. How did the Belgian government deal with this? And he had his view, but you're sort of similar in the openness of it, but. I want to know how General, how do you say his last name? Is it Brower?
De Brouwer, yeah.
How close did you get to him? I think he, in all of your stuff that I've seen with the two of you, how open, he seemed to me, and I just want you to confirm this, he seemed to me like he just was frustrated. He wanted to get this information out. He wanted to stay constant with it. He didn't want to let up. And he also really wanted to find out what the heck was going on. And he wasn't playing around.
Yeah, that's all true. I mean, he was assigned by the Minister of Defense, to sort of deal with this on behalf of the Air Force. And the problem he had was he didn't have the proper staff, the time. It wasn't set up for him to be able to deal with it in the way that he would have liked to. So he ended up working with a very competent group of outside scientists, this group called SOBEPS. And they did a lot of the work because he just didn't have the staff or the time to do it. And so fortunately, because of this other group that he worked with, a lot was accomplished. But he was the point person within the Air Force who was in charge of dealing with the investigation and very sincere about it, very serious about it. And he knows a great deal about the wave. I mean, he gives great lectures and talks about it. And he wrote a chapter in my book about it from his perspective. So he did. He put everything he could into it. And he still feels today, that he would like answers. He would like, he really is he's an important voice that we have, a high level, very competent general who was directly involved like this, who was able to come out and say as a result that the world needs to take this a lot more seriously and governments need to approach it in certain ways. He's convinced that this was not any kind of American or Russian craft. He went to the highest levels of those governments, both the American government and other governments and the NATO countries to inquire whether it could have been one of theirs. And it was not. And we have documentation from the U.S. government showing that. So he is as perplexed about this as anybody else. And he's a great guy, a wonderful person, and a terrific spokesperson on this event. I just think he's a very, very valuable educator about the subject.
Can you imagine for just a second how the United States would have dealt with the very same, if they were given the same circumstances to deal with? Photographs, sightings, official, cruising around, black triangles over Washington, D.C., how we would have handled it. I really have to give it to the Belgians and the government and him specifically, because they were taken to task, and he really press conferences like that. Can you imagine that going down in Washington, D.C.?
No, I could not. I cannot. And we know that, as I said, the Hudson Valley wave was only 5 years before this, and we saw for that absolutely nothing. Our government had no involvement at all. In a press conference, there's a video, there's footage of that press conference that took place in July of 1990, which is so fascinating to me. With De Brouwer up there, showing the radar data, because they had scrambled these F-16s, and they're showing all this data, and the press is all over the place asking questions. It's all very official. He's there in his uniform. Yeah, and it's just the way it should be. But you're right. It's inconceivable that would ever happen in our country. And I commend, I think the Belgians did a tremendous job at trying to deal with this and making it public. They weren't keeping secrets from people.
I'll tell you where the parallel is for us Americans is, think about this for a second. You remember Schwarzkopf doing his press conferences in the tents in the desert, showing all of the radar data and the missile attack, and he was so proud, and with the monitors in back of him, and all of his generals in front. That's what the Belgians were doing with these black triangles. It was
exactly.
It was the
exciting.
same. It was the same type of press conference, and that's how the Belgians dealt with it. And you're right.
Exactly.
We had the same thing going down in Hudson Valley. It wasn't spoken about. And then we fast forward to 1997, 1998 with Phoenix. And what happens now? I don't want to say anything negative about the governor of Arizona, Symington. I'm not going to go there. But his first press conference, he kind of made a joke of the whole thing when he brought that. One of his aides came out in the alien costume, and I know that he regrets that now. But my point being, that's how we dealt with. That's how we were dealing with press conferences at an official level. We were making fun of it, and there was enough witnesses in Arizona that said, "Hey, wait a minute, that's not. You can't make a joke of this. So he had to backpedal and come back and apologize."
Right, 10 years later.
Yes, 10 years later. 10 years later.
People were outraged by that, and they had every right to be. Yeah, it's a very interesting comparison. I think you're right, and to think that was only in 1997, it wasn't very long ago.
Nope.
Putting aside that the governor did this silly press conference, but the bigger point is that our federal government had absolutely nothing to say. Nothing to say about the fact that there were these objects cruising over populated areas for over an hour.
Right.
I mean, and can you imagine, that actually happened, and yet the government of the country in which that happened has nothing to say about it?
Right.
And they will not say a thing to the citizens who witnessed it and who were potentially frightened or unnerved or whatever.
Right. Well,
not secure anyway, and their government has no comment to make. It's actually quite bizarre when you think about it.
I have two different takes on the Phoenix Lights, because I think that there were two separate events that occurred that night, and this is my take. I think that what the initial set of footage, because I watched it live here in Los Angeles. I traveled to Phoenix once or twice a month on business back then for about 10 years. And I had just gotten back from Phoenix, and I come in to my condo here in Sherman Oaks, and I turn on the TV, and then it's there. And I was like, how did I miss this? I just got off a Southwest flight into Burbank. Well, anyway, I see the videotape. Now, that original videotape, I think, were flares. That I'm going to give them. That was flares.
I agree with you on that.
Right, but the true event is what flew across the V-shaped craft that flew down across the state. Forget about was stationary over the mountain range in Phoenix. And for everybody out there, you have to understand how Phoenix is. Phoenix is desert, it's flat, but it's surrounded by these majestic mountain ranges, not unlike what's here in California and Los Angeles. And behind that mountain range is an Air Force base. But those were flares. That's not what I'm talking about, although I think they are related. I think the Air Force definitely scrambled some jets. They dropped some flares, and they wanted to see what was going on. That is the connection. But the flare incident is separate. The craft flew all the way down to Tucson. I think it even made a U-turn at some point too. But that videotape of and there's only one or two that survive right now that are out there. That was a real craft, and that was a real incident, and that's what the governor himself saw.
Exactly. Yeah, and that was earlier. The key thing is that those sightings were mainly between 8:30 and 9:30, around that time, and the flares weren't till 10 o'clock.
Right.
So the flares were at a later time than the actual sighting of the real event. And you're right, they're two separate events.
Tell me about your meeting with the governor and what he had to say about what he saw.
Well, what he said he saw, and I actually went with him to the location where he saw it, and heard the whole narrative. He drove to this park because he heard it. I think he heard it on the radio. He heard somehow that this thing was happening, and he got in his car, which he wasn't supposed to do without his Secret Service, but he did it. And he went to this location, and there were these mountains there, sort of like what you described, and he was just hanging around there, and there are other people there, and then this thing just came drifting over, and he watched this gigantic thing, a triangular thing with lights on the corners, just kind of drift silently. Huge silent thing kind of go overhead, and then go over the mountains. And so he saw it, and he just didn't want to say anything for lots of different reasons, which anyway, he regrets, but given the context in which he was operating at the time, it's sort of understandable. But he just saw it along with hundreds and hundreds of other people who saw it.
And he was forced into admitting it later, that, I saw this myself, and I know that this wasn't anything. I believe, didn't he go through some official channels trying to get an explanation as well? And came back empty.
He tried to get answers, and he couldn't get anything. He went to the Air Force bases, and he did make an effort, and the people just said, "We don't know what it was. We have no answers." And he wasn't actually forced to talk about it, but 10 years later, he was being interviewed by James Fox, the filmmaker, who just wanted to find out from Symington why he did that press conference. He just said, I thought I want to ask him a little more about that press conference, which was so outrageous. And James had no expectation of anything beyond that. And he was just flabbergasted when he got into this interview with Symington, and he came out with the fact that he himself had been a witness to this. That was when it first came out. And James informed me about it and set up a meeting. I had this long phone interview with Symington over about it, and then I ended up doing a print story on that kind of broke it. I published a story in in a small Arizona paper, and the media, national media went wild over it for like a week. I mean, Symington was being approached by every national TV station there is. He did a show for CNN, I think, and Fox or something. But anyway, that's how it happened. He just decided that he didn't want to keep it secret anymore, and he wanted to try to make amends with the people, that he had an awareness of the fact that had really hurt people. And he recognized the reality of this, and thought that our government should have a different approach than it has. He just decided it was time, since he was no longer in politics.
Leslie, we're going to take
and you can, in my book, he's written. I have a chapter where I quote a lot from him, explaining all of this in his own words.
Leslie, we're going to take a break. We need to reset our Skype connection. We're going to take a little quick break. We'll be back right after this. This is Fade to Black. We're going to reset this Skype. 1-800-916-6232. That's the number you need to call when you are seeking spiritual enlightenment and searching for your true purpose here on earth. www.lovespellstoday.com. They provide psychic readings, love spells, reversal of spells, custom spells, chakra balancing, energy work. Divine guidance is just one phone call away. Call 1-800-916-6232 for your free psychic reading. I did. And tell them Jimmy sent you.
Hello, Herculean Ulysses. listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
My name is Nick Dominguez.
Hi, I'm Rex Dominguez, and I listen to jimmychurchradio.com. Jimmy is your preacher.
Amen. This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to jimmychurchradio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier, and this is Ari Gold. We're of the Honey Brothers.
Yes.
We are of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And I'm Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
And you're listening to Jimmy Church.
The Revolution.
KJCR.
JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church, KJCR on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Got all of your emails. Keep it coming. Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. Don't forget to follow us over on Twitter at jchurchradio. We are live in New York with the one and only Leslie Kean. Okay, Leslie, we reset your Skype. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh,
can you hear me okay?
It's beautiful. Okay. Good. Leslie Kean. It was funny to get that email, and I wasn't in any way making light of it. It's just you and I had that conversation, and sure enough, somebody just had to feel like they were correcting me.
I think it is funny.
All right. Now I want to shift gears a little bit and kind of actually have a little bit of fun. I want to talk about all of the citizens' hearings, the way the government is looking at disclosure today, and your efforts in that, and of course, Stephen Bassett is getting ready to relaunch everything again on March 31st. I don't know if you've gotten his press release on that from PRG, but he's taking it to the hill, man. He's going for it. And how did you start it originally, and where are your efforts today? But tell us about your first press club in Washington.
The very first one?
Yeah, well, I know you did two, but one on your own.
Yeah, there were two that I did in relation to the Kecksburg Freedom of Information Act effort, which was just a very specific. Those were in 2002 and 2003, and both of those had John Podesta there, and it was all about the lawsuit, basically.
Okay.
So, and then in 2007, I co-organized the International Press Club, conference with James Fox. It was basically a press conference, but it had about 12 people from around the world that we brought in, and James sort of used that as a jumping off point for his movie called I Know What I Saw. But it was really a fantastic event, I thought, and I was privileged to be able to work on bringing in a whole lot of fascinating people to that event, and many of them which ended up writing chapters for my book later, and I met them there for the first time. So those are the events that I've organized in Washington. Most of my work is behind the scenes. The people in Washington that are really capable of doing something about this are not people that want to be out in the public eye. They don't relate well to the whole sort of disclosure quotes effort that's going on, which is not something that I particularly feel affinity with in the way it's being handled. I'm just not part of that whole scene. And I don't think it's particularly productive, but I know it's going to just keep doing its own thing. But those are the people that are, the more serious people are not going to be dealing with that. They work quietly behind the scenes, basically, and they don't want to be in the public eye.
Do you feel that you have to communicate to Washington, different? Do you have to put a political jacket on, a politician's, shirt, and communicate with them in that way? Is it a bit different? Do you have to be kinder and gentler?
Yeah, I'd say you have to be very careful about the language you use, about what you say and don't say. They can be put off extremely easily. They're very skittish, very leery of the subject. And I did write a piece for the Huffington Post, which I would love it if people would read, which sort of outlines my approach to this and why I think it's important, and all the people that have weighed in. I've learned what I do from people in Washington who know how things work there. I've been trained. I've been mentored by people. So I've learned directly about, there's a reason for why you approach this in a certain way. And I've written all about that in this article in the Huffington Post, which people can read. And unfortunately, the people that are part of this so-called disclosure movement are not using the appropriate language, or taking the kind of approach which is going to get sympathy from the political establishment.
Well, explain. I'm very curious as to, we do naming without naming names, or we can. It doesn't really matter. But, and who I've had on my show this week and last week and the week before. So, but what is it that is wrong about their approach?
Well, I think the main thing that's a problem is saying that extraterrestrials are already here, that extraterrestrials are communicating with human beings. The bottom line is there are objects in the sky that we can't explain, but we do not know. It has not been proven that they're extraterrestrial. And it has not been proven, at least at a level that the scientific community and the political community can accept. So yes, we may have our own knowledge, our own beliefs. We've done a lot of research. All of us know a lot more than what the politicians know.
Right.
But they are not in a position, they cannot accept that extraterrestrials are here engaging with the planet Earth, or whatever the line is that they use. What they need to be given is data that shows that's irrefutable, that shows what we actually can prove. And that kind of language makes them want to run away, because they don't want to be associated with this sort of little green men thing. They need to be informed about, what the pilots are seeing, what the radar is showing, that there's an aviation safety hazard, things like that. But you can't make assumptions that we've already figured out what UFOs are when we haven't.
So I guess what you're saying, and again, I'm not going to play around with words here. So what you're saying is what you don't want to do is try to pin a politician into a corner and say, hey, I need you to tell me that our government is hiding this information from us, and we want you to say that you are. That is the wrong approach?
Well, I mean, for instance, first of all, the politicians don't know anything. The
right.
Politicians don't know anything about UFOs, and they don't care about UFOs, most of them. But if you're going to try to interest them in the subject, you don't do it by telling them extraterrestrials are here, just flat out, like expecting them to accept that. They don't accept that. They're not going to. They'll just laugh. To say extraterrestrials are here talking to human beings. That's what these people the disclosure people are saying.
Right.
And number one, that they're saying that. Number two, they're saying there's a deep, dark, secret program. There's bodies in storage that, there's been decades of cover up and all this. I mean, politicians are not going to take that seriously. They might take seriously something like Colonel Charles Holt going in with all kinds of documentation about this event that happened in a military base. But if he were to talk about, I ran into all these beings running around and I know that this was extraterrestrial and blah, 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 they're not going to be interested in that. It's just a question of putting aside your own personal knowledge and personal beliefs about this and using the kind of language that they can accept. You have to play their game their way, right? And if you want them to pay attention to you, you have to know what they're willing to entertain and what they're not. There's a line that's clear. And I learned from working with the Podesta Mattoon firm, the firm that's headed up by John Podesta's brother, what you can say to politicians and what you can't say about the subject matter. And I spent years working with that firm and learned where you have to draw that line. And it's not about what the truth actually is. It's about what works in terms of getting them to be comfortable responding. So that, I think, is the key thing. And if you go on about extraterrestrials, they're not going to want to have anything to do with it.
That is an interesting. I want to come back to that. That is an interesting view, and I think people need to listen. That is okay. I have a couple of emails, really quick. A couple of questions I want to get out there to you. This is the first one. This comes from Renee. Oddly enough, in Tucson, Arizona. By the way. It's funny about we were just talking about Tucson, and this is she has a two-parter. First part is, have you ever been pressured by any government officials to change or delete or minimize your UFO reporting in any way?
No, absolutely not. Not in the slightest. Not in the slightest.
I think I want you to actually expand on that a little bit, but I think probably because maybe you're so black and white.
Well, I mean, I don't go out on extremes at all. I'm very much focused on, only dealing with what we actually know, what is actually irrefutable, what the absolute best information is from the highest level sources. And I'm not interested in the rest of it that's speculative, in my opinion. So because of the information I present is so solid, that's why I'm able to hold a briefing in Washington with John Podesta as a host and invite high-level people to come, because they recognize that this is a serious approach to this subject that I'm offering them. It's not full of sensationalism, assumptions, accusations. The other thing about the correct way to approach government, Jimmy, that I think is another important point, if just psychologically, if you're accusing somebody of doing some terrible thing, they're not going to be inclined to want to be helpful to you.
Right.
So if you're screaming at the government, you've had this big cover-up since 1947, and there was a crash saucer, and you're hiding all this information, and we need full disclosure. We need you to tell us that the extraterrestrials are here, and you're the bad guys. It doesn't make anybody very inspired to cooperate with you if you take that approach. You need to, the approach that I take, and this is what works with these people, is to ask them for their help, to make them feel that they're needed, to help you figure out the answers. What is this phenomenon? We need your help, America, because look what the other countries are doing. The other countries are asking for your help. And if you came on board, we could learn a lot, and maybe we'd figure out what's going on here. That's, and it makes them feel needed. It makes them feel, it strokes their egos. It makes them feel there's a role for them to play, but I'm not accusing them of anything.
Right. With when it comes to Chile, I'm going to ask you a direct question. Have they presented you with any type of evidence that they have tried to maybe get to the United States and get the United States help, just like you're saying? Is there anything there? Have you been a conduit between the two countries?
Well, I mean, I'm starting to be that more. I'm trying to get what I've done is I've and they have some very good evidence. I mean, they don't have anything that's more extraordinary than anything else. They don't have something, but they've reached out in their own ways over the years to the government, and I haven't gotten any response here. They've reached out within their own country to the embassy there and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But what I want to do is I've written up some documentation about how they operate and how they're staffed and how they were formed, and all the things that an official would want to know about how the agency functions in this other country. And I would like to be able to bring that information to the right people in Washington. I also have some communications that I am sort of a conduit, communications from the heads of both the French and Chilean agency that have been written for people in Washington that explain why these people believe that it's important for the United States to do what they're doing, basically. So it's sort of like the leading people in these officials in the world are actually directly appealing to the United States to come on board. And that's never been done before. That's never happened before, where they've actually written a letter expressing that. And I've got those letters, and I'm trying to get those letters to the right people, but I'm only going to do it in person. So, but that's a step that's something that's never happened before. So we'll see what happens.
Do you have? We are up against another break. I don't want to take a break. I want to continue talking about O'Hare. I want to jump into the O'Hare subject. Normally, I would just take a break and come in with another subject, but let's. Is it okay if we hang on with you for another 15 minutes? And
yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. I know it's late there, and I appreciate it. So
sure.
Let's talk about O'Hare because. Earlier today, I was telling you, I was born in Chicago. So when this O'Hare incident happened, I feel, there's an obvious connection there. One of the most fascinating cases for us because, number one, it's modern, it's recent. We have the communication from the tower, which I'm going to have you talk about all of that. I'm just giving you my point of view on this. And it's just one of those things, aha, here it is. Okay, we've got something and not a photograph. I asked you today, is there some top secret photo? Is there something out there that you can give to us? Nothing.
Right. There's no photograph, unfortunately, of O'Hare that surfaced. I mean, there may be photographs that somebody is holding on to, or that maybe they were given over to some authorities that we don't know about. Who knows? But there is no photograph that we have access to. And what's interesting is that when the when the United Airlines manager called into the tower during the event was actually happening in real time as she called in. She told the FAA tower that there was a photograph, that one of the pilots had taken one. That photograph has never been found. So it's unfortunate, but there's enough eyewitness accounts of what happened that we know that the thing was actually there. There's no question about that.
Okay, so take us back to what happened. Let's start from the beginning because it's an absolute fascinating occurrence. So let's just start from the beginning. What happened, and what year? What year was this?
It was in 2006.
Exactly. Okay.
November of 2006. The story didn't break until January of 2007 because there was about a 2-month period where various things happened before it actually came out in the Chicago Tribune when it was a big story when it came. But what happened was that, so it was November 7th. It was just a sort of a normal day, November day at O'Hare Airport. And it was around 4:30 in the afternoon, so it was kind of during the rush hour period. And a number of people on the ground, it was, managers and people who were moving planes around, the baggage handlers, people that were out on the tarmac, saw this disc-shaped object hovering over gate C-17. It was over the United Airlines terminal. And it went out over the radios on the ground aircraft. It was, chatter all over the place, and people were going outside to look, and it was probably up there for at least 5 minutes or something. It was a long time. There were pilots that were leaning out their windows looking up at it, and it just hovered up there. And then suddenly what happened was it was hovering right below a cloud bank. It was about 1,500 feet up, 1,500, 1,800 feet. It was the bottom of the cloud bank. So then it shot straight up through the cloud bank. Just all of a sudden it went zooming straight up and cut a clean kind of cookie cutter-like hole right through the cloud. This crisp round hole just zoomed up and disappeared. And that was the event. That's what happened. And I can follow up with what happened afterwards if you want. But
well, the description from everybody was it was a flying saucer, like it was your classic UFO.
Yeah, I mean, it was a disc-shaped object. That's how the witnesses tend to describe it. It looked metallic to them, definitely disc-shaped, with no visible means of propulsion, nothing except this metallic disc. And then it behaved in a way that they said no aircraft behaves. They've never seen anything like it. No aircraft can just shoot straight up through a cloud bank and cut a hole in it.
Now, the FAA, the flight controller, she was a she, right? What was her name?
The one who called in from the United Airlines, her name was Sue.
Okay.
She was a manager from United Airlines. She called into the tower where the radar tower to ask if they were picking up on anything, because she was getting all these reports of these discs. It's such an interesting thing. You can listen to the tape, then hear how the person in the tower is just kind of laughing at her for even calling in. Now, it's just shocking because she reports that there's a disc hanging out over gate C-17. And the guy who's named Dave, who's the FAA official, the radar guy, is sort of laughs at her, and she has to kind of, make sure she makes the point that I'm not drinking, I'm not high, and they sort of giggle.
Right.
The point is this is a safety hazard, Jimmy. There's something up there in the middle of a busy airport.
The world's busiest airport,
there, and
right.
they're laughing about it.
Right. It's a hazard. It's the busiest airport in the world, or certainly one of the busiest. We've got traffic, we've got lives, and he wants to treat it as a joke because the words UFO and flying saucer, I think, were used when she called in. And
disc, she says it's a disc.
And how else is she supposed to describe it?
Right. She says there's a disc flying around out there, and he goes, "What?" And she says, "A disc." A disc? And it goes on like this. And then he puts her on hold for a long time. And then, she says, I told so-and-so there was a disc and he thought I was high. But I'm not high and I'm not drinking, she says. And he goes, yeah, And then she says, someone got a picture of it. And then he goes, a disc? Like a Frisbee? She goes, like a UFO type thing. Those are the exact quotes. I'm reading it right now. Like a UFO type thing. So she did say that. And he goes, yeah, okay. And then he's laughing. So, but meanwhile, when you think about the fact that this disc up there could be from anywhere, could do anything at any moment. A plane could crash into it.
Right.
Completely unknown. It's not supposed to be there. The whole thing is just phenomenal. And yet this poor woman has to sort of save face by kind of laughing along with this guy just to make herself seem like she's not, off the wall.
Right. And the only reason why I'm laughing right now, it's because of the way that our official, the FAA, their reaction to something like this. And I don't care if it was a UFO. I don't care if it was a flying saucer. It'd be great if it was. I don't care about that. What if it was just a helicopter hovering over C-17? What would the reaction? The reaction would have been a little bit different. The fire trucks would have been out there. There would have been immediate radio response. There would have been contact. Get out of there. You're in the approach pattern of aircraft, and there would have been an immediate, succinct, fast reaction. But no. UFO, flying saucer, flying disc is mentioned, and his reaction is, "Are you high?" You know what I mean? That is fascinating to me.
I agree with you. It's fascinating.
I remember seeing this for the first time, and you talking about it, and you were dealing with it in a matter-of-fact way. I wouldn't have dealt with it. If I would have been in that documentary, it would have been a different reaction. I wanted to change gears really quick off of this because we're running out of time. I want to talk about Rendlesham, and I do want to talk about Charles Halt specifically. And I know that this is in your book, but again, just like this whole ancient alien UFO subject, it's all over the place, and we've seen this in the last year with Rendlesham. It is, there's books coming out now. Nick Pope has got a book coming out at the end of this month about it. Rendlesham is a fascinating case, and I will start this off with saying I know something happened there. I think that the story over the years has gotten a little bit more fantastical, and more is coming out about it. I know that something happened. It's obvious. I don't know if you remember when the original set of tapes came out, the audio from Halt, but I remember listening to those on the internet 20 years ago, and I was absolutely blown away by it because it's real hard evidence. But I think the story's gotten a little bit out of hand. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that could be true. I think that, I mean, my focus is much more on the Colonel Holt story than it is on the Peniston and Burroughs story, just because Holt does have the tape.
Right.
He has, there were 5 people with him, and they're on the tape, and it's just so well documented. He wrote his memo. He's an extremely sound guy who has not been at all shaken by this the way Peniston and Burroughs have been personally affected by it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I don't have absolutely no doubt in what he says, and I think his story hasn't changed at all over the years.
Right.
But I think Peniston and Burroughs were very affected by what happened to them, and I understandably so, because they were so close to the object. And who knows the long-term effects that has on somebody. I just think I feel compassion for those guys because they've really, really been hurt by the whole situation.
Well, I guess what I'm referring to, and again, I'm not gonna hold back at all, but originally with Halt's memo and his notes, his personal recollection, his witnesses, his audio tape. That, just like you, is the way that is a black and white situation. We can get transcripts and look at everything. That's black and white. I get that, and you're right. Halt's story hasn't changed over the years. And how could it? I mean, we're very lucky that he happened to have that tape recorder that night. So that part of it is black and white. But then we get into the touching of the craft and this binary code and everything else where with Peniston, where it's just gotten to me just a little bit out of hand.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the binary code thing is something brand new, so I don't know what to make of that. I just wasn't involved with it, quite honestly. I just, don't know what to make of it.
Well, this whole subject for all of us, we need to keep we need to have people look at this seriously, and then the more fantastic it gets, then it just turns into just a story, and I don't want it to turn into that. The part the part with Colonel Holt and his memo, and the way that the Ministry of Defense said it existed and then it didn't exist, and then it turns out that it really did. That part of it. Then you've got the cover-up side of it. I know that Nick Pope is very sincere and is one of the best out there for us, but the Colonel Holt side of it, again, I just want your opinion. Do you think it's just gotten a little bit out of control?
You mean not Colonel Holt, but you mean the other components?
Yeah,
of it.
the other components of it.
Yeah, I do. I think they have. I agree with you. I do. I mean, I'm sort of disappointed. I kind of would have preferred that even if Jim Peniston did have something happen to his mind through the binary codes and all that, I think it would have been better for the case if he hadn't even made it public.
Exactly. And
I mean, that's what I mean about choosing what you're going to reveal, how you're going to approach it, what you're going to say and not say, to be very careful about all of that. And a lot of people don't think about it. They just sort of want to come out with whatever they want to come out with. So I don't think it helps the case at all. That's the point.
Well,
whether it's true or not, it just doesn't help the case.
Exactly. Well, I want to thank you for coming on, but before I let you go, a couple of things really quick. What's coming up for you in the next year? I know that you're going to France, and I'm going to let everybody know right now out there, we've got all of Leslie's links up on the website, going over to her book as well. And anything that you need, our links are up there, and you can do anything that you would like to do if you need to get a hold of Leslie and order her book, because it is one of the best. And we have a link up also to the video. So,
and also my Facebook page is people can come on there. It's a very active page too.
Yes, it is, and I think that's originally how I chased you down.
Could be, yeah.
So what's you're going to France next month? Now, actually, that's in March, but today's the 31st. So,
okay.
So that's a month away. You're going to France, and what are you going to do over there?
Well, they're launching the French edition of my book, so it's going to be doing a lecture. And General de Brouwer is coming down from Belgium, and they also have this famous French astronaut who's written the foreword to the French edition. His name's Jean-François Clairvoy.
Okay.
And he is going to be also at this event. The three of us are going to kind of do a presentation, but I think they're going to have me do the bulk of it. But and then there's going to be media interviews and all the stuff that goes around with launching a new book. So I don't, other people are setting all that up, but I'm excited about going.
And what?
Really fun.
Anything else going on this year?
Oh, I have I have various film documentaries that I'm, television programs that I'm consulting on and being interviewed for, cases I'm looking into. But there's not a whole lot of concrete stuff that I can really talk about. I guess
I was hoping you were going to mention the documentary that you were working on with Breakthrough Films.
Yeah, I mean that actually. That needs to be updated on my website. That documentary is the one we were talking about that was on History Channel. But it was written on my website. I actually have updated. My webmaster just doesn't have it up yet, but it's already been aired, so that's all just sort of an old bio that needs to be changed.
I thought you were working. Yeah, I thought you were working on a new documentary, and I was all excited about that.
I've got to change that. I know it's understandable. You would have thought that.
Well, thank you for coming on. Again, it's just a conversation, and I really hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Oh, I did very much. Yeah, it was great. Thank you, Jimmy, for having me.
If we find it interesting, then so does everybody else, and that is the point. So again, thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right, that's Leslie Kean, by the way, and another email just came in. It's Kane, everybody. All right. Thank you, Leslie, and I'll shoot you an email tomorrow. Thank you for coming on to the show.
Okay. Bye-bye.
You have a good night. Leslie Kean. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Shoot us some email. We got a bunch. I'm going to get to those in a second. Phone lines are open, 323-825-5045. I'll be back after the break.
What's up? My name's Brian Taylor, Ninja Badass Extraordinaire, and this is JimmyChurchRadio.com.
JJCR in your face.
JimmyChurchRadio.com on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
All right, everybody, welcome back. KJCR. Woo! JimmyChurchRadio.com. Shoot me an email to Jimmy at JimmyChurchRadio.com. Again, that is why I am here. Right there. That is a perfect example of it all. 323-825-5045 is the number to call. I've got some emails I want to get to that came in last night. Thank you, Leslie Kean. I got a total of 1, 2, 3, 4 emails saying that I was saying her name wrong. Leslie Kean. Now you know. It's Kane, not Keen. I wanted to talk about a few different things. And again, let me check. Okay, the phone lines are open. So I just want to make sure that I've cleared everything out. Yes, 323-825-5045. On February 18th, I want everybody to, this is a big deal. February 18th, we are going to take the show live on the road right here in Studio City, California, with Richard Dolan. He's got a new book out. It came out yesterday. The book is out and available. He is flying in from the East Coast, and we are going to have between 100 and 200 people live, studio audience, and we are going to do the show live for 3 hours. And I had been talking to Richard about coming on the show for the last month. And he said, I do. I want to come on, but the book is coming out. And I'd really, if there was a way we could tie in the both together, well, this opportunity came up, and we thought, let's do something a little bit different that nobody has done before. And this is how I want you to look at it. I've got a call coming in. Let's just go ahead and do this. Let's just do this live. Here we go. You are live on the air. Who's calling? You're live.
Yeah.
This is Jimmy. Who's calling?
Mark Center.
Oh, Mark Center. Hi. How are you, sir?
I'm doing quite well.
We had on Philip Mantle yesterday, your good friend, and we spent about, I'm sure your ears were burning, we spent about 15 minutes talking about you specifically.
Well, that's very nice. I'm getting a very bad echo. I'm hearing myself twice.
Okay, well, you are, just so you know, you are clean going out here. So that is probably your cell phone, hearing yourself twice. And I can let you know that I'm listening, and I've only got one Mark Center.
All right, well, I'll just deal with it on my end, and we'll just get on with it.
Okay.
No problem.
Now that, and thank you for calling in, by the way. And before, I want to ask you a couple of questions, and you know exactly what I want to talk to you about. But did you listen to Leslie?
No. I've been working on projects at the house and things.
Okay.
No, I haven't. To be honest, I rarely listen to your stuff live. That's the cool thing about, YouTube and the internet is I can stream it out to my backyard 24/7 while I'm doing projects.
Oh, well, that is the beauty of it. And what we are going to, I've gotten a bunch of email this week, and so I'm going to address this right now to everybody out there. We are interviewing, so to speak, auditioning different podcast companies. And I want the best podcast company available. And so in the meantime, yes, there is YouTube and our website, and the files are up there, and you can listen to the shows at any time. It isn't a downloadable situation for podcasting, but we will have that solution very, very soon, probably in the next week or so.
Excellent.
So, now this is the deal. The last, I would say the last 2 weeks or so in the broadcast here, the word hoax has come up more time, and it's not me, but the word hoax has come up constantly. And of course, we did Santilli yesterday with Philip, and you and I talked about Santilli last week or the week before. And I've gotten so much email, and so we decided that what we're going to do here, check this out. We're going to do, I think, one day a week. I'm going to have a hoax special. In that, now there's a difference between hoax and lie. There's a difference. Hoax is when you go and you lie and you get caught. And you've told a story, you've created something, and you've relayed this story, and the story isn't true. Because you lie about robbing a bank, that is not a hoax. That's two different things. Mm-hmm. Do you understand? And so, we're going to definitely approach that. There are so many great hoaxes out there where somebody really pulled something off. But what I wanted to talk to you about, and it could get us in a little bit of, but I don't mind the shooting match. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Cal Korff, KKK. Mm-hmm. Take us back. I know that your knowledge is probably better than mine on Cal, and I'm pretty thorough and fascinated with this guy. Take us back. How did he originally surface? Do you remember? Can you go back that far? When did he pop up, and who is he?
He popped up, generally speaking, in the 90s. He got more coverage because of his Billy Meyer book and his Roswell, The Things They Don't Want You to Know About the Roswell Case book. And in the 90s, it was his heyday. Oh, and his JFK thing. But in the 90s was his heyday, and he was on many UFO and paranormal shows, and that's where I first got my taste of Cal Korff, because he was on all those shows, the Kiviot shows, the greatest hoaxes in 1999 and such. But I suppose it was his Billy Meyer book that really put him on the map. He was on bulletin boards and things of that sort, talking about Bigfoot and things before that, the Patterson footage and such. But
right,
it was the Billy Meyer book, because, you know, no matter what you may think of Korff, he was one of the only ones to actually go over to the compound on a couple of occasions and infiltrate the compound and, you know, try to do some research there at the site where the claims and photos and such came from. So you do have to hand that to him.
Well, and I'm willing to do that, and I'll accept. Was he because of everything that has followed him after the original wave of Cal Korff in the 90s, things went really bad for him. So then, and I'm talking about telling the truth. So what part of his past was he truthful about? So let's start there with Billy Meyer, because I question, was he actually there? Was he really on the compound? Because his okay, and so you feel confident about that part?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, because he tells the story about him coming up to some girl that was some young girl on the compound that he said was obviously American, and I know that you know the story. And he goes up to her and he speaks English to her, because he knows that he can tell by looking. And she was from, oh man, my memory, Arizona or something. I could be wrong. But, and her mom sent her over to get educated by Billy Meyer, and and then he reported it to the authorities. I just wanted to make sure, was he actually there? I don't know if that story is true, about him and the little girl and reporting it, because you just don't know what is true and what's not. But
right, to get to the bottom of it, yes, he did go there. He went there on a couple of occasions. Once he went there with a lady he was working with up in Washington, you know, because he did work for Boeing. And the problem with Cal Korff is this: He has done things. He's written books. He's written for magazines. He's written for newspapers. He's been on TV. He was on the Larry King Show. There are a number of milestones, for lack of a better term, that he was a part of. The problem with him is that it isn't good enough, and he will confabulate and add to and stretch out all of these milestones in his life. And back to the Billy Meyer thing, yes, he did go there. He did go there to try to get to the bottom of the Billy Meyer case.
Do you think, okay, again, I care very little about him as a person. What I really care about is how he would stand up in front of a microphone or in front of an audience and spew some other stuff. And he continued and continued. We'll talk about where he is today and the result of all of that in a minute. But do you think that when the Billy Meyer stuff and that book came out and the debunking came out, and I think that some of the research, or a lot of it, was actually very, very, very good. So, do you think that he should have I think you touched upon it, but I just want you to be a little more matter of fact. Do you think he should have just pumped the brakes at that time and just rested on his laurels and just let it go instead of just take it to the next level where he just didn't need to go there?
Yeah, I think possibly a little bit more pragmatic, staring into his mirror and trying to keep on an even keel.
Right.
We talked about this before. The problem with ufology and paranormal, quote unquote, is that you're only as important as your last discovery or release to the press and to the public. So you do the Billy Meyer thing, which is one of the biggest cases. You do the Roswell thing, you do the JFK thing. Gee, not a whole lot left except nuts and bolts research and maybe the Rendlesham Forest, et cetera, et cetera.
Right,
so
right.
He kind of got caught up in his own Walter Mitty type of world where, again, he's done some stuff. And he decided to elaborate, fabricate, confabulate these truthful things in his life into craziness. I mean, again, if you go to UFOWatchCat.com, Cal is an idiot.blogspot.com, and YouTube to the Cal Israel YouTube channel, you will see just so much stuff. It's mind blowing.
Yeah,
on this guy's propensity to confabulate.
Well, it is some of the best entertainment in its purest form that you can have on the internet. Is just going, because this is the truth too. It's nearly endless. As soon as you peel back a layer, there is something else there. Now, I don't have an axe to grind. There's nothing there personally between him and I, and that I could care less. It's not that. I'm talking about as a pure entertainment value. There's nothing finer than going out there and doing a little Cal search. But what my concern is in this industry, it's tough enough for guys like you and guys like me and Philip and guys out there that are really out there trying to fight the good fight and just trying to get to the bottom and find out as much as we can and then communicate that back out to the masses. That's what we're here to do. And then you've got a guy like this that comes along and just not only goofs it up for himself, but for everybody else, and then just turns it into, a vaudeville act. And now we have 10 years of total entertainment just to go back and watch and learn how not to do it. And I'm being serious.
I think mostly it's a very good example of it's the best example of how people in industry like ufology, I mean, I can call myself an expert. So can you. You read a few books, you watch some videos, you go to some conventions, you get to where you can recall name, dates, and times and people.
Right.
Similarly, if you study the Bible or the Quran or whatever,
yep.
all of a sudden, you have, if not an answer for everything, you have what seemingly seems to be an educated guess and assumption with everything having to do with the subject. And with Cal, he much like Hoagland and a lot of these other guys, what are you going to do? You've run out of information, so you either go into something else, like make up your own military organization in the Czech Republic, or instead of Mars, you go to the moon and you look for glass buildings on the moon.
Right.
Same type of thing, but in
Forrest's
case, he went too far. He pissed off a lot of people, and then those people got together, and they call themselves Corfers, and what they do is Corfing, and they look for information, and they call people, and they just got tired of his antics, And some of his antics actually did harm to people like David Bietney and such. And
right.
They just got together and said, we need to expose this guy. And they actually contacted me because of my autopsy work. And I kind of had some things to do with Korf. And they said, would you like to help us research this guy? We're going to put up a website and this and that to try to shut him down. And as you can see, it did.
Yeah,
except for Facebook, it shut him down.
Do you think that he is? This is kind of an obvious thing to say, but you think he's out of the country just to avoid lawsuits?
Yeah, that's hard to tell. No Korfer that I know has gotten, the bottom line on that.
Yeah,
I mean, it is interesting for him to go to the Czech Republic in 1999 and 2000, but what was uncovered was that some of his family have ties there. It is mostly, there's a lot of English spoke there. You would feel comfortable there. You can live without, a green card, so to speak, because they're really lax on that. You can teach English there and get a room for cheap. So it kind of makes sense that you would want to go to a country like that if you don't know anybody. Now he's in India, so that is a stretch to go from a nice, clean place like the Czech Republic and then go to India, which I don't want to bag on the Indian people, but let's be honest, it's a bit like Tijuana, right?
Well, yeah. On top of that, why would he leave the Czech Republic? That's a great quote. Well, okay, let me back up for a second though. There's a couple of weird things that he said that and I'm not making this up, and this is on video. This is not conjecture. This isn't anything that is what do I want to? Well, it doesn't matter. But he went on one of his lectures, or a bunch of them, and said crazy things like he had the biggest selling book of Roswell of all time. When you go and say something like that, you need to have bullets in your gun. It's a flat out lie. It's not true. It's anything that can be checked. But why do that when you don't have to? And then he went on to say that, what was it? He had a 500 book deal, and then it wasn't the JFK. Didn't he have a 6 or 8 part book deal on that was getting ready to come out? Why say these things when you know that there's no way that it's ever going to be backed up? I don't get it. When you don't have to.
Yeah, it seems like between 2007 and 2010, he reached his sort of zenith of confabulation, where the 500 book deal came out, and then the Saudi prince with the $25 million bankroll to help him go from kind of ufology to consumer fraud.
Yeah, consumer fraud, yeah.
The paranormal, so he could sue Billy Meyer, and he could sue Ray Santilli, and he could sue the guys who made the Patterson, and went on and on and on. I'm not going to say he's, crazy or that he's got mental problems and things. He does write for a newspaper, an English language newspaper in India. I've read his stuff, and he doesn't come off like a lunatic now. It's one for the ages, Jimmy. Why somebody in the age of the internet would act the way he acted when the majority of the stuff can be vetted? And
yes.
If you're going to say this stuff, we're going to check.
That's right. Well, you brought up a point earlier, and I'm going to correct you actually when you said that, Jimmy, even you can be an expert, you just go and read and well, you know what? That's the one thing, I'm not an expert on anything when it comes to that. I might be able to talk Fender Stratocasters. I can call myself an expert, but when it comes to anything else, you need to be very careful, Cal Korf. you need to be very, very careful about how you approach things. I'm not an expert. I'm a guy with a microphone that wants to relay information. That's it. I just want to have people appreciate coming into this show and listening and walking away going, you know what? I learned something today. That was really cool. That's all right. And that is my take on things. And there is no reason, there just isn't, to take another view and try to make yourself out to something that you're not, because today people, and you said the key word there, you're going to get vetted. You're going to get vetted. People are going to find out. I get emails all the time about little things that I say. People listen. They do, and they call you out on it. And you just need to be careful. A 500 book deal.
Right, and the people like nothing more through Facebook and the internet in general. People like nothing more than to take you down. So again, this wasn't my deal. I was working on the autopsy, and in 1999, I contacted Korf, and Philip Mantle was involved with this, and he said, we've proven that the alien autopsy is fake. We have stills from the set. We have the models. We have yada, yada, yada on the alien autopsy. And I said, are you talking about the tent footage, or are you talking about the autopsy where they cut it open? And he said, it's about the body that they cut open. And I said, wow, that's interesting. Well, they're going to have a show, The Greatest Hoaxes and such, and they asked me to be on there, and I didn't want to because I'm not comfortable on TV and such. And then he wouldn't come up with any, proof, quote, unquote, and it turned out that it was the tent footage, and I felt a little burnt. I contacted him about it, and I said, hey, this is what you told me. And he said, do you have any emails to prove that? And I said, well, I don't have emails from 1998, 99 on my system anymore. And he says, I don't remember saying that. But then he went on to get in good graces, I guess, to tell me that he's going to have this reality show on TV, and that he would give Phil Mantle and myself our own show and our own channel, quote unquote. And it was a whole long dissertation almost on him being in this secret organization to fight consumer fraud and terrorists in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And it went on and on and on. And in the end, nothing came of any of it, and he just sort of went away, and I was like, wow, this is interesting. So I got into studying him, found the cowisandidiot.blogspot.com, posted a couple of things up there, and those guys came back and said, hey, you want to be part of the Korfing Syndicate, and sort of vet this guy. And I said, well, sure. He kind of treated me poorly. And I said, sure. So, a number of us got into this thing, and the deeper we got into it, and he found out about it because we were taking his videos and re-editing them with what we thought was the truth, or just making fun of him.
Right.
And he would make, claims, and basically we would just around the world and send emails and make phone calls and stuff to try to vet this stuff. And then, I'm going to sue you now. I'm going to sue Don Ecker, or I'm going to, all this stuff's going to happen to you guys. And it finally got to the point that when UFOWatchCat.com, that's a URL Korf used to own, and then one of the Korfers sort of grabbed it from underneath him. When that went live, it was like, Jimmy, nothing ever happened between 2007 and 2010. Gone. He never mentioned any of that again, and it just floated off like fairy dust. Done. Gone. All of that 10 years, he doesn't comment on, doesn't mention. That's an interesting behavior.
Yeah, and whatever happened, well, obviously we know it didn't exist, but it's like the 500 book deal, or the 6 edition, 8 edition set, this, that, the $25 million consumer fraud grant or money investment that he had, or everything just completely stopped. And now I understand what he's doing now in India. That's great. He's writing, he's cooking in people's homes. He's or he's being he's invited to this home and that. But and that's great. Maybe he's changed his ways a little bit. I don't know. But why do you think that just the silence on it? I mean, there's no attempt to extend it, is what I'm trying to say. Oh, maybe the book deal is next year, but there's not even that conversation now. I just find it fascinating.
Right. But because he can't see, he knew that as soon as he got the taste on calisanidiot.blogspot.com that people were actually going to take the time for entertainment, for pleasure. I just helped out because I love to research.
Right.
And some people were pissed off at him because he harmed in ways that I won't get into. He harmed some people. So he knew that the gig was up when that website was going to go live, and he actually sent an anonymous email threatening one of the choreographers a couple of days before it went live.
Right.
Saying that I know who you are, and there is a group of security agents from India, and they're on their way to your house.
Yeah. And see, this is the thing. I want everybody to understand why this is even being talked about right now. It's because this gentleman was actually, he was a player in this industry for
a long time.
He was somebody in this industry. And he was somebody that made a lot of money in this industry. He was somebody that people looked up to, somebody that people believed, and people paid good money to go and see his seminars and buy, his books and listen to him and hang, and somebody that deserved a lot of that attention. He really, really, really did. I'm not saying that Roswell book was that I didn't agree with the point of view that he took on that, but it was a book that was written and people read it and respected him for it. The Billy Myers stuff was fantastic, and that's the thing. Yes. That's why we are talking about it today. This is not about, and for a lot of people out there that, this is going back, let's think about it. This is 16, 17 years now. This is 97, 96, 97, 98. Yes. So there's a lot of people that are in this industry now, or that are into this kind of research, that have never heard of him. You have to remember, they're listening to us talk right now, and they don't get it. Well, you have to understand why we are talking about it. This is a guy that meant something to us at one point, and we are all disappointed in the way that it took. And he took the turn. Seriously, Mark, to me, he took a right turn right when he was probably his most influential, and then suddenly snapped. And I mean, snapped, man.
Yeah, because he left right at the same time that the greatest hoaxes ever told by Kiviat, sort of the follow-up to all of those shows he did, like the Alien Autopsy Factor Fiction, Ghost Factor Fiction, Angels Factor Fiction. And yes, that's a very interesting point, that something in his personal life, which we may never know, but something must have happened in his personal life right after that milestone in his life to make him, and he says it was the terrorism thing that he was fighting since he was like 17 years old in high school and stuff. I'm not buying it. Something went down, and it could have been something as simple as, it's a harsh thing to say, but I'm not making a lot of money. I've been going through job after job after job after job after job. I got no wife, no girlfriend. Things aren't going real good. I've got an opportunity to reinvent myself in a country that's, mostly Caucasian, let's say, not to get racist, but somewhere where you feel comfortable, right? So mostly Caucasian. They speak English. The food there's good. The women are absolutely stunning. and you can teach English and make a go of it. Something happened, and, you know, his mom evidently probably said, hey, we have, you know, maybe some distant cousins that live in the Czech Republic.
Right.
Goes back there, he checks it out during one of his trips to the Meyer thing, says, wow, and he just uproots himself. And Jimmy, that's a big deal. I mean, when you're an American and you move somewhere alone, and that's I mean, I wouldn't do it.
Nope.
And then even a bigger deal when probably you're getting pressure from the Czech Republic, both because you're way over your visa, supposedly, probably, more than likely, you've ripped off a humanitarian there for some Apple products, and they're breathing down your neck, and he's thinking, well, I did go to the Afghan border with my homemade nano dust, etc., to go fight you know, terrorists and things. I've made some friends in India. Maybe it's time for me to go to India and make a go of it there.
I just don't understand. And
I know.
I remember I was watching, this is years ago, and I stumbled across a couple of his videos, and so I was like, oh wow, that's right. So I go and I just clicked on this video, and I'm watching him kill. He is slaying. He is just, and it was probably 1997. Little grainy, but he looks good. He's, you know, he's healthy. He's got control of the audience, and he is just tearing Billy Meyer apart. And he's got his little laser pointer, and he's just rack, and I'm like, man, awesome. You know, that's why he had us. And then he just crashed in the middle of this seminar, just like he took his car, jerked the wheel to the right, and drove it straight off a cliff, and started rambling about this just crazy things about Roswell and this investigator and this, and I'm right and they're wrong and this, and I'm like, what? And it was a fascinating thing to sit there and watch somebody. It was almost morose, you know, to sit and watch and continue to watch this. And if I was in the audience, I would have just thrown up my hands and just go, what are you doing? And he did that with his life. And like I said, I can understand why he had the ability to grab a hold of an audience. Not only, you know, Larry King or whatever, he had that side of his personality.
Yeah. Again, I got nothing. I mean, you know, I wasn't happy when the autopsy thing went down, but I have nothing personal against the guy, okay?
Neither do I.
I'm just a researcher in a group of researchers, but he's just, see, I can find goodness in everything, and I don't know how many of the videos you watched, both of his personally and then the ones that were re-edited for fun or for truth, but I have to hand it to him. He went up onto YouTube, and he took that Kevin Randall book, one of his books on Roswell, and he would open it up, he would read some of it, and he would say, this is why I think that he's wrong about this. And I got to tell you, Jimmy, I applaud that way of doing research.
You're nothing wrong with that.
It's a free way to do it. It doesn't cost any money. It's open to the world, and you can do that with anybody else's research. And as long as you're mature about it and you've done your research, you are welcome to your own opinion about somebody else's research. And I said, wow, he's actually stumbled upon a really cool way to disseminate his beliefs and his research on somebody else's, but because of the immaturity and because of the overblown ego of, you know, some of the highlights of his life that were, you know, positive to him and were actually factual, he couldn't leave well enough alone. If he just would have, like, taken the Jimmy Church book, done the same thing, taken the Friedman book, taken the Elders book, taken all of these books and just ripped them apart with his belief and his research, maybe it would have went somewhere. But there's something skew with his personality, and he had to make it personal, and he had to make it grandiose, and he had to be the ugly American, in a manner of speaking.
Oh man! And again, I want everybody to understand. I have nothing personal. It's just nothing personal. He's never done anything to me. I don't care. That's not why we're talking about him. We're talking about him because this is somebody that I admired. We all did at one point, and he was right there, and he had us. He did. He had us, and then for some reason, he chose to drive his car off the cliff, and now with this downward spiral that has happened, now we are able to actually go and study this and watch, and like I said, almost be entertained in a morose kind of way. And it's all out there for us to see, and it's absolutely crazy.
It's fascinating, Jimmy, and as the Corfers would send emails back and forth, now that it's 2014, Cal K. Corf pretty much ceased the videos and things in 2010, so a lot of them pine for the days of that entertainment when you would go to YouTube and there's old Cal ranting and raving.
Right.
It's no more. It's no more. But,
oh man, I would love to get Don Ecker on this show, just to let him wind up for a few minutes and go off. That was
well, hey, he Don's a stalwart. And he's not someone to fool around with. When Corf stole the identity of that lawyer from Los Angeles, and said and sent an email to Don himself and to cyber stations where his show is run out of, and said basically, pull this guy off the air, yada yada yada, and then we call. Or Don calls this lawyer, and he goes, "What the hell are you talking about?" And of course, couldn't do anything about it because he was I think he was in India at that point. So there's really nothing you can do. But the depths of, I don't know, mental unstableness or some kind of outrageously overdone ego and self-worth and things drive somebody to steal, like, hey, Jimmy, I'm Jimmy Page.
Right.
So now you know Jimmy Page, Jimmy, and you're talking to him right now.
Right. Well, this is
got to phone up Jimmy and say, Jimmy, were you on Jimmy's show last night? No, mate. I mean,
but you hit the nail on the head, and I don't even think how close you knew how close you were, and I don't think it's anything mental. I really no. He's too smart for that. I really don't. I just think it was an ego and a self-satisfaction, narcissistic way that he was dealing with it. And there's plenty of people out there like that. As a matter of fact, for anybody that does what I do, or that wants to do it, or to be a lead singer in a band, or to be a movie director, anybody that wants to do something that's a little bit more self-centered, okay, there is an element to that. I understand that. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. There are people that do what I do, and there's people that don't do what I do because they can't. It's not in them. And that's just it. But for him, he had that times a million. And that's what I think it was. It was just something that he couldn't control. The whole self-centered, self-assertive, overly self-assertive, megalomaniac type of thing that he couldn't control it. That's all it was. I don't think it was anything mental at all. I just think he just couldn't control the PR machine that was KKK. And that's
and it's all self-done, all manufactured by him. Yes, I completely agree. I don't think that there's necessarily anything majorly mental with him because he can write and he can. I mean, I see him on the stuff he writes and all that. So I think also you're not at home. You're not with family and friends. You're left to your own devices, and you're sort of in your own universe, and you're building this manufactured persona, et cetera, et cetera. And what sunk him was the internet. Because if the internet wasn't available, then he would have had to write books and try to get on TV shows and write for magazines and all that. But with the internet, he said, gee, YouTube's free. Gee, blogs are free.
Facebook.
Websites, by and large, are free. So it gave him the opportunity to just go bonkers with not reeling it in. You know, even though people were calling him on the carpet and all that.
Right.
It's so hard to dot the I and cross the T on this, at least for me. I mean, I got no answers on the bottom line of Cal K Corp. It's just so, I mean, I'd like to be able to tell you this is why he did it. But I think it's just runaway ego and a very lonesome dude with a lot of time on his hand.
Mark, you can call in anytime. I love it when you do. You always make it interesting. All the best. My producers are just now, they're in my ear. Okay. We're out of time. So anyway, my friend, always great to talk to you. And let's communicate over the weekend and hash out some ideas, and we'll.
Hey, I got plenty more I can talk about, both music, movies, and you know, the frozen Bigfoot. We won't talk about that.
You know what? Let's talk. I liked your comment on that post, by the way. That was, like I said,
it's very annoying, Jimmy, but I do appreciate, and we'll talk, and we'll try to do something. Sure.
You're absolutely the best, Mark. I'll talk to you over the weekend. That is Mark Center, everybody, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Jimmy.
All the best. Mark Center. Okay, we reached the end of another great week here at Fade to Black and the Dark Matter Radio Network. All right, I'm going to do a couple of things really quick. I do want to say I will jump in after the show tonight, as I always do, and we'll get into the forums. I'm looking here on the screen. We've got 5 new strings, so I'm going to go and check out those and hang out for a little bit. And I had a couple of emails that I wanted to get to, you know, and Mark calls, and I get to talking, and I get a little sidetracked. One of them, and I'm not going to say this guy's name, but the initials are SDM. Is he a hoax? You know, this is the thing. A hoax is, and I kind of just touched upon it there, and I don't want to run this into the ground. I just want you to understand my position, why I talk about it. There are things that are, and I had a couple of, I had 1, 2, 3 emails come in about American Computer Corporation. That's a hoax. That is a hoax. A hoax is not when somebody like SDM, first name is Sean, somebody like that. No, that is not a hoax. That's an opportunist. I will never say his name on this show for any reason at all. There's no reason to do that because he's a self-promoting guy. That's not a hoax. It's just, if you want to buy into that, you can buy into it. A hoax is when somebody, launches a story out there as the truth, and you find out that they fabricated the entire thing. That's a hoax. And so there's a difference there. We are up against it. And again, I want everybody to have a great weekend. And thanks for coming in. Don't forget February 18th. February 18th the show is live on the road. The links are up on the website. Shoot me some email over the weekend, Jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. Next week, we are booked up. We will change the website. Oh, by the way, the reason why I don't launch and advertise our guests in advance is because we have the biggest and the best here. And I don't need somebody else out there coming in and swooping our guest. That doesn't do anybody any good. So I'll announce everything next week. We have some great stuff coming up next week. Now, again, February 18th, go and check it out. Do the forums. Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com is the email. Follow us on Twitter, which is at jchurchradio. Over the weekend, we will get all of this week's shows up on the web. All right. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. You guys, everybody, have a great weekend, and I will talk to you next week. Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network is produced by Rita Camurian. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm. The announcers are Steve Harder and Mark D. Kovar. Music, you're listening to him right now, is Doug Aldrich from Whitesnake. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network. Special thanks to Keith Rowland. I am out of here.